The Alari orbital palace did not look like a military target. It looked like jewelry abandoned by a god, suspended in the upper atmosphere of the gas giant Typhon. The station was a translucent ring of crystal and living metal, roughly 20 kilometers in diameter. It caught the violent, shifting light of the planet's auroras, sheets of teal and amethyst fire that spanned thousands of miles, and refracted them through its hull, making the entire structure glow with an inner, organic pulse. Swarms of escort drones moved around the docking spires like silver minnows darting around a coral reef, guiding the heavy, blocky shapes of human diplomatic cruisers into the delicate embrace of the alien heavy-gravity berths. Cassian Ward watched the spectacle from the viewport of the shuttle ironclad, his forehead resting against the cold, transparent steel. He had seen beautiful things in the galaxy, usually right before someone blew them up. He checked the time on his wrist unit. It was 0800 hours. Ship time. He had been awake for roughly 72 of them. The shuttle banked, the inertial dampeners whining in a frequency that made his teeth ache. Cassian adjusted the collar of his dress uniform. It was stiff, high-necked, and charcoal gray, adorned with the modest ribbon rack of a veteran who had survived too many campaigns in the Mud Wars. He hated it. He preferred the kinetic armor he had lived in for 10 years. But General Halloway had been very specific. "You are not going there to shoot things." "Ward," the general had said, his holographic image flickering over the comms table 3 days ago. "You are going there to make sure the Alari do not shoot us. Look presentable, smile, and for the love of Earth, do not break anything." Cassian rubbed a thumb over the scar that bisected his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a shrapnel burst on the moon of Cocytus. He was 38 years old but felt at least 50. The reflection in the glass showed a man with close-cropped dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that were permanently narrowed, as if bracing for a sudden change in cabin pressure. The shuttle thudded into the docking clamps. The hiss of equalization cycling filled the cabin. Cassian stood up, grabbing his duffel bag. He was the security liaison. It was a fancy title for a glorified bodyguard and babysitter for the diplomatic corps. The Human Systems Alliance needed this treaty. The war skirmishes over the last decade had drained the treasury and left 3 colonies purely theoretical. They needed Alari trade routes, and they needed the Alari to stop looking at humanity like a particularly aggressive bacteria culture. He stepped out onto the docking ring and immediately felt out of place. The architecture was fluid. There were no hard angles, no rivets, no seams. The floor felt like polished obsidian but yielded slightly under his boots, absorbing the sound of his footsteps. The walls curved upward into vaulted ceilings that seemed to mimic the ribcage of some leviathan beast, constructed from a pale, shimmering material that looked like bone infused with pearl. Every corridor looks designed to make humans feel clumsy, Cassian thought. He walked past a squad of Alari royal guards. They were 7 feet tall, slender, and wore armor that looked like carapace, iridescent blue and green. They held energy pikes and did not look at him. They did not have to. The Alari were telepathic to varying degrees. They probably smelled his caffeine withdrawal and his skepticism before he even cleared the airlock. He navigated the labyrinthine halls toward the grand atrium, following the helpful holographic markers that floated in the air. The station was humid, smelling faintly of ozone and crushed flowers. The atrium was a cavernous space dominated by a viewport that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a terrifyingly unobstructed view of the gas giant swirling below. The storm clouds of Typhon were large enough to swallow Earth whole. Standing in front of that terrifying vista was a solitary figure. Cassian slowed his approach, He recognized her from the briefing packets, though the two-dimensional images did not do the reality justice. Princess Lyria Elari, the niece of the current regent and the second in line for the Emerald Throne. She was shorter than the guards, perhaps only 5'10", which was petite for her species. She wore a gown of shifting fabric that seemed to be woven from smoke and liquid silver, leaving her arms and shoulders bare. Her skin was a pale violet shade, almost translucent, and along her collarbone and down her arms ran intricate, bioluminescent markings. They were not tattoos. They were part of her biology. Chromatophores that reacted to her neurochemistry. Right now, they were flickering in a chaotic staccato rhythm of pale yellow and distressed gray. Cassian stopped 10 feet away, not wanting to startle her. He was supposed to report to the head of security, not the royal family, but the corridor to the security hub was blocked by a maintenance drone, and this was the only detour. She looked rigid. Her hands were gripping the railing of the viewport so tightly her knuckles were white. She was projecting an aura of controlled calm, a psychic wall that Cassian, even with his psychic null human brain, could almost feel as a static charge in the air. But visually, she was falling apart. He took a step forward to bypass her, intending to give a polite nod and keep moving. The deck plates beneath his feet gave a violent, sickening lurch. It was a gravity glitch. The artificial gravity generators on the station were old, ancient biotech that sometimes forgot which way was down. For a split second, down became sideways. Cassian's boots lost traction. He stumbled, his center of gravity vanishing. He flailed, instinctively reaching out for an anchor. He slammed into the railing next to the princess, his heavy boots skidding loudly against the pristine metal. He barely managed to catch himself before colliding with her. Lyria gasped, spinning around. Her hand shot out, grabbing his forearm to steady him. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers cool and dry. But the moment skin touched skin, Cassian felt a strange sensation, like a static shock that traveled up his arm and settled behind his eyes. Lyria's eyes went wide. They were large, luminous, and entirely black, filled with swirling nebulae of gold flecks. She released him as if he were red-hot iron and took a sharp step back. Her bioluminescent markings flared a brilliant, startled teal. "I apologize," she said. Her voice was melodic but tight, vibrating with tension. "The stabilizers in this sector have been temperamental. I should have warned you." Cassian straightened his jacket, feeling the heat rise in his neck. He had been on the station for less than 20 minutes and had already nearly tackled royalty. "The fault is mine, Your Highness," Cassian said, keeping his voice level and dry. "I am still getting used to the floor deciding to be a wall. My primitive human knees were not built for variable physics." Lyria blinked. The chaotic flickering of her markings slowed. She looked at him, really looked at him, tilting her head slightly to the side. "It is not primitive," she said softly. "It is sturdy." She seemed to realize what she had said and clamped her mouth shut, a flush of darker violet rising in her cheeks. Cassian offered a small, crooked smile. "Sturdy. I will take that as a compliment. I am Cassian Ward, security liaison." "I know," she said. Her gaze dropped to his hands, then back to his face. "You are very quiet." Cassian frowned slightly. "I try to keep my voice down in hallways." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I mean your mind. It is quiet." Lyria Elari felt as though she had been standing next to a jet engine for her entire life, and someone had suddenly turned it off. For an Elari, specifically one of the high blood, the world was a cacophony. She did not just see and hear people, she felt them. The palace was a storm of emotions. The guards radiating bored vigilance, the courtiers projecting jagged spikes of ambition and envy, the diplomats hiding swamps of deceit. It was a constant crushing pressure against her skull. She had spent her 25 years of life learning to build walls, to compress her own volatile emotions into a singularity so tight it hurt, just to keep from bleeding her feelings into everyone else. Her reputation as fragile came from the times the dam had broken, when her empathic overload had caused grandmothers to weep and soldiers to drop their weapons in sudden, crushing despair. But this human, this Cassian Ward, when she had touched his arm, she had braced herself for the usual blast of chaotic human thought, desire, confusion, aggression. Humans were notoriously loud, their minds broadcasting their lack of discipline like a radio stuck between stations. Instead, she had felt a cool, gray silence. It was not empty. It was deep. Beneath the silence, there was a profound, heavy sorrow, like a stone at the bottom of a deep lake. There was discipline, forged in fire. There was a sharp, jagged alertness. But it was contained. He held his pain inside a fortress of will that was stronger than any mental shield she had ever encountered. It was the most soothing thing she had ever felt. It was dangerously comforting. "I did not mean to be rude," Lyria said, tucking a stray lock of silver hair behind her ear. Her markings shifted from the teal of surprise to a softer, inquisitive lavender. "Most minds are noisy. Yours is restful." Cassian watched her with dark, guarded eyes. "I have been told I am hard to read, usually by ex-wives and commanding officers." Lyria found herself smiling, a small, genuine expression that felt foreign on her face. She was supposed to be the icy, distant princess, the doll in the glass case. The moment was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. Lyria stiffened, her markings instantly bleached to a neutral, colorless white. She pulled her emotions back, locking them in the iron box in her mind. Regent Malcor rounded the corner, flanked by 2 advisors and a human diplomat Lyria recognized as Ambassador Higgins. Malcor was tall, gaunt, and elegant, his skin the color of bleached bone. He wore the heavy, high-collared robes of the Regency. His mind felt like a scalpel, cold, precise, and utterly lacking in warmth. "Princess," Malcor said, his voice smooth, "we wondered where you had wandered off to. The reception is beginning. We cannot have the guest of honor absent. It sends a message of disinterest." Lyria bowed her head slightly. "I was merely observing the arrival of the delegation. Uncle, I lost track of time." Malcor's gaze flicked to Cassian. He looked the human soldier up and down with the same interest one might show a stain on a silk rug. "And you have found a stray." "I see," Malcor said. Cassian snapped to attention, his salute crisp. "Liaison Ward." "Sir?" "Just arriving." Higgins, the human ambassador, looked nervous. He was a sweating, portly man who looked terrified of the Alari. "Ward, good. Get checked in and get to the security perimeter. Try not to loom over the guests." "Yes." "Ambassador," Cassian said. Lyria felt a spike of irritation at the way they spoke to him, dismissive and arrogant. She wanted to say something, to defend the man who felt like a sanctuary, but she bit her tongue. She was the fragile princess. She was the political pawn. She was expected to be silent until told to speak. "We are walking to the Grand Hall," Malcor said, gesturing to Lyria. "Come, child. Lord Varric is waiting. You know how impatient he gets when his future bondmate is tardy." Lyria felt a wave of nausea. Lord Varric, the arranged match, a man whose mind tasted like spoiled wine and copper. She cast one last glance at Cassian. He was watching her, his face impassive, but for a second, she thought she felt a ripple in the silence of his mind, a flash of curiosity, and perhaps concern. "I am coming," Lyria said quietly. The reception hall was a testament to Elari excess. The ceiling was 50 meters high, drifting with anti-gravity orbs that glowed with soft, golden light. The walls were lined with vertical gardens of singing moss that hummed in harmony with the string quartet playing in the corner. Hundreds of guests mingled. Elari nobles in flowing robes of light-weaving fabric stood in clusters, sipping nectar from crystal flutes. Human officers in dress blues and diplomats in tuxedos moved among them, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Cassian stood at the edge of the room, near a pillar of translucent quartz. He had checked in with his command, dropped his bag, and immediately gone on duty. He held a glass of water he did not drink, his eyes scanning the crowd. He was looking for threats. He was looking for exit routes. But mostly, he found himself looking for her. Lyria was at the center of the room, standing next to the regent. She looked miserable. Her markings were shifting rapidly, a sign of distress she was trying to hide. A tall, preening Elari male, Lord Varek, presumably, had his hand on her shoulder. It looked possessive. Cassian took a sip of water, watching the dynamic. The regent was whispering something to an aide. The Elari guards were posted at the doors, looking bored. Cassian's gaze drifted upward. Above the center of the room, directly over the regent's circle, hung a massive chandelier. It was a masterpiece of Elari art, composed of thousands of suspended plasma crystals. They were razor-sharp shards of energized glass, held in a complex geometric formation by a dedicated gravity field generator. It weighed easily 10 million tons, or it would if the gravity field failed. Cassian narrowed his eyes. The crystals were pulsing, not the gentle rhythmic pulse of the ambient lighting, but a jagged, erratic stutter. He glanced at his wrist unit, tapping into the localized security grid. He was not supposed to have access to the station's infrastructure, but he had spent the shuttle ride running a passive decryption algorithm on the public frequencies. The readout for the chandelier's gravity tether spiked. Zone 4, gravity nullification. The readout flashed in red text. Cassian dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. But he was already moving. He did not think. He did not calculate the diplomatic fallout of tackling a princess. He simply reacted. The instinct that had kept him alive through 3 planetary invasions took over. He sprinted across the polished floor, ignoring the startled gasps of the crowd. "Lyria!" he roared. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw him charging at her. Above them, the hum of the gravity tether died with a sound like a cracking whip. The chandelier dropped. Cassian left his feet, diving. He hit Lyria hard, wrapping his arms around her waist and driving her sideways. They hit the floor and rolled, Cassian twisting his body to keep himself between her and the ceiling. Behind them, the world exploded. Thousands of razor-sharp plasma crystals slammed into the floor where she had been standing a microsecond before. The impact was deafening, a thunderclap of shattering glass and releasing energy. Shards flew like shrapnel. Time seemed to slow down. Cassian squeezed his eyes shut, tucking his chin to his chest, shielding Lyria's head with his hand. He felt the heat of the plasma singing the back of his uniform. He heard the scream of the crowd. He felt Lyria's breath against his neck, rapid and hot. He felt her heart hammering against his chest. He opened his eyes. They were tangled together on the floor, surrounded by a ring of destruction. A jagged spear of glowing crystal, 3 feet long, was embedded in the floor inches from Cassian's boot. The air shimmered with heat and dust. Lyria was staring up at him. Her pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold flecks. Her markings were flaring a violent, blinding hot pink, the color of pure shock and adrenaline. She was trembling, her hands clutching the lapels of his jacket. "Are you hit?" Cassian asked, his voice rough. Lyria shook her head, unable to speak. Her aura was wild, crashing against his mental shields like a tidal wave, full of terror and a sudden fierce gratitude. Cassian realized their position. He was hovering over her, his legs tangled with hers, his body pressing her into the polished stone. It was intimate. It was scandalous. The silence in the hall was absolute for 3 seconds. Then, the screaming started. Cassian rolled off her and got to his feet, offering her a hand. She took it, and he pulled her up. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Regent Malcor was staring at the wreckage of the chandelier, his face a mask of fury. Lord Varric had been knocked backward by the blast wave and was picking himself up, looking more offended than injured. Cassian dusted glass powder off his sleeve. "Well," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence, "I must say, Your Highness, I did not intend to fall for you quite so literally." Lyria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Her markings rippled from pink to a confusing swirl of gold and blue. You saved me," she whispered. Malcor marched over, his eyes blazing. "What is the meaning of this? You broke protocol. You touched the princess. I preferred touching her to watching her get skewered by a decor malfunction," Cassian said calmly, meeting the regent's gaze. Malcor looked at the giant crystal spear embedded in the floor. He looked back at Cassian. His jaw tightened. It was an accident. Malcor hissed, "A malfunction." Cassian looked at the ceiling. The anchor point for the chandelier was fused. But as he looked closer, his veteran's eye caught something. The maintenance panel next to the anchor was blinking a steady, rhythmic pattern. That was not a malfunction. That was an override. He looked at Lyria. She was watching him, and he saw the realization dawn in her eyes too. She felt his suspicion. "I suggest we clear the room," Cassian said, "before something else decides to fall." 2 hours later, the palace was in lockdown. Cassian was in a small, crystalline data chamber deep in the security sector. It was a cramped room, illuminated only by the blue glow of holographic displays. The door hissed open. Cassian turned, hand dropping to the stun baton on his belt. It was Lyria. She had changed out of her ruined gown into a simpler tunic and trousers of dark blue silk. She looked tired, her markings dim and slow-moving. "You should not be here," Cassian said. "The regent ordered you to your quarters for your safety." "My uncle thinks safety means ignorance," Lyria said, stepping into the room. She tapped the door panel, sealing it behind her. "I want to know what you saw." Cassian studied her. She was terrified. He could see it in the tension of her shoulders. But she was here anyway. He turned back to the console. "I pulled the logs from the gravity grid before your uncle's guards locked me out." He brought up a holographic schematic of the ballroom ceiling. "Here." Cassian pointed to a string of code running along the side of the display. At 1900 hours, the safety protocols for the chandelier were disabled. Not by a glitch, by a command. Lyria leaned in, her shoulder brushing his arm. She did not pull away this time. "Who sent the command?" "The signature is ghosted," Cassian said. "It was routed through a maintenance drone, but the origin point is encrypted. However, look at this." He magnified a section of the log. The security drones in that sector were rerouted to the lower levels 30 seconds before the drop. That is not a coincidence. That is creating a blind spot. Lyria stared at the floating numbers. "Someone tried to kill me," she said softly. "It was not an accident." "No," Cassian said. "It was an assassination attempt." and a sloppy one. Or maybe it was not meant to kill you. Maybe it was just meant to scare you. Lyria wrapped her arms around herself. Why? To stop the peace talks, Cassian said. If the princess of the empire is killed while hosting a human delegation, the regent would have no choice but to blame us. Or at least, claim we were negligent. The treaty dies. The war starts again. Lyria looked up at him. Her eyes searched his face. You moved before the crystals fell, she said. You knew. I saw the power spike, Cassian said. You could have shouted. You could have run. You put your body between me and the glass. Cassian shrugged, turning back to the console to hide the sudden discomfort he felt under her scrutiny. Reflex. Reflex, Lyria pressed. To die for a stranger? I have done it for less, Cassian muttered. Lyria stepped closer. Her aura reached out, tentative, brushing against his mind. She did not need telepathy to read the tension in his jaw. She felt the sudden, sharp jaggedness of his memory. A flash of fire, a scream, a soldier named Miller bleeding out in the mud of a trench while Cassian tried to hold his chest together. The crushing weight of guilt. I should have been faster. I should have seen it. You have lost people, Lyria said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Cassian froze. He gripped the edge of the console. Everyone has lost people. Your Highness, it is the nature of the profession. But you carry them, she said. She reached out, her hand hovering inches from his scarred brow. You carry them like stones. That is why your mind is so quiet. You are mourning them. All of them. Cassian looked at her. He wanted to tell her to stop. He wanted to put his walls up. But looking into those vast nebular eyes, he felt something in his chest loosen. Better to carry stones than to bury them, he said roughly. Stones do not rot. Lyria's markings shimmered a soft, mournful blue. She lowered her hand. Thank you, she said, for risking your life. Again, Cassian let out a breath. Don't thank me yet. We still don't know who programmed the drop. He tapped a key, bringing up a list of personnel with access to the drone maintenance subroutines. The list was short, 5 names. 3 were low-level technicians, 1 was the head of the maintenance guild, and 1 was a cryptographic signature that did not belong to a person. It belonged to a secure terminal in the Regent's private spire. Cassian stared at it. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Lyria saw it. She went pale. That is my uncle's personal code, she stammered. But it could be forged. Someone could have hacked his terminal. Maybe, Cassian said, though his tone suggested he doubted it. Or maybe the call is coming from inside the house. The room suddenly felt very cold. Lyria gasped, her hands flying to her temples. She staggered back, her eyes squeezing shut. Cassian caught her arm. What is it? Her markings flared a sickly, bruised purple. Do you feel it? She gasped. I don't feel anything, Cassian said. It is an echo, she whispered. A thought, a mind. It is here. She looked around the empty room, her eyes wide with horror. It is hateful, she said, her voice trembling. It hates you, it hates me. It feels like rot, like old, hungry rot. Cassian scanned the room. There was nothing, no one. Focus. Lyria, he said sharply. Is it a person? I cannot tell. It is slipping away, but it was watching us. It knows we are looking. She looked at Cassian, and for the first time he saw true terror in her eyes. Not the fear of falling glass, but the fear of something much worse. We are not safe here, she whispered. Cassian's hand tightened on his stun baton. He looked at the door, then back at the alien princess who was trembling in his grip. He realized with a sinking feeling that his simple security detail had just become a war zone. "You are right," Cassian said grimly. "Stay close to me." He opened the door and stepped out into the corridor, placing himself between her and the dark. The palace, once beautiful, now looked like the inside of a trap, and the jaws were beginning to close. The council chamber of the high spire was a study in aggressive geometry. The table was a floating ring of obsidian, suspended over a gravity well that dropped away into the hollow core of the station. If one dropped a stylus, it would fall for 3 kilometers before striking the reactor shielding. It was designed to make everyone feel precarious. Cassian Ward felt right at home. He stood at parade rest behind the chair of Ambassador Higgins. The ambassador was vibrating with nervous energy, his datapad rattling slightly against the polished stone of the table. Across from them sat the Regent Malcor, flanked by Lord Varric and a severe-looking Elari woman who commanded the palace guard. Princess Lyria sat to the regent's right. She looked like a porcelain statue. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her bioluminescent markings were a flat, opaque gray, the color of a storm cloud waiting to break. "This incident," Malcor said, his voice smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen, "is regrettable. However, our preliminary analysis suggests that the interference frequencies emitted by human communication arrays destabilize the gravity tether." Ambassador Higgins sputtered, "Regent, with all due respect, our arrays operate on a standard subspace band. We have been docked for 48 hours with no issues." "Technology is unpredictable when cultures clash," Lord Varric added, examining his fingernails. "Perhaps your equipment is simply too crude to interface with our lattice without causing damage." Cassian stepped forward. The movement was small, but the sound of his boot heel on the floor echoed like a gunshot in the tense room. "It was not a frequency mismatch," Cassian said. His voice was low, carrying the gravel of a man who had shouted orders over artillery fire. The regent's eyes narrowed. He looked at Cassian as if the furniture had suddenly started speaking. "Liaison Ward," Malcor said. "You are here to provide physical security, not engineering opinions." "I am here to ensure the safety of the delegation and the station," Cassian replied, meeting the regent's gaze. "I reviewed the logs. The command to drop the gravity tether was hard-coded. It bypassed the safeties. That requires a clearance level higher than any human possesses." Silence stretched across the table. It was heavy and suffocating. "Are you accusing a member of the Elari nobility of sabotage?" Lord Varric asked softly. His tone was dangerous. "I am stating facts," Cassian said. "Someone rerouted the security drones to create a blind spot. That is not a malfunction. That is a tactical setup." Malcor stood up, his robes flowing around him like oil. "This is preposterous. I will not have a human soldier cast aspersions on this court. Ambassador, control your pet, or I will have him removed from the station." Higgins looked ready to faint. "Ward, stand down. You are..." "He is correct." The voice was soft, melodic, and startled everyone in the room. Lyria did not stand, but she lifted her head. Her eyes, usually cast down in submission, were locked on her uncle. "Lyria?" Malcor frowned. "Do not speak of things you do not understand." "I understand what I saw," Lyria said. Her markings flared a faint, stubborn gold. "Liaison Ward and I reviewed the data trail together. The code signature was internal. It was ghosted, but it originated from within the high spire. The room seemed to drop a few degrees in temperature. For Lyria to speak against the regent in front of aliens was unheard of." Malcor stared at his niece, his mind pressed against the room. a cold weight of disapproval. Cassian saw Lyria flinch slightly, her shoulders curling in as if bracing for a physical blow. But she did not look away. "You are confused, child," Malcor said icily. "The shock of the accident has rattled your senses." "My senses are fine," Lyria said. "And because the threat appears to be internal, I am invoking the right of personal stewardship." Lord Varek sat up straight. "Princess, surely you do not mean—" "I require a personal security detail," Lyria said, her voice gaining strength, though Cassian could see the pulse jumping in her throat. "One unconnected to the palace guard. Until the investigation is complete, I appoint Liaison Ward as my primary guardian for the duration of the peace talks." Higgins dropped his stylus. It fell into the gravity well and vanished. "That is impossible," Malcor snapped. "A human, guarding the blood royal? It is a desecration of protocol." "It is a show of faith," Lyria countered. "If we are to be allies, we must trust them. Unless, uncle, you believe a human is incapable of the task?" She had trapped him. To deny it would be to insult the human delegation and scuttle the treaty talks right there. Malcor's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned with a cold fury. "Very well," Malcor said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "If you wish to demean yourself with a primitive shadow, so be it. But be warned, Liaison, if a single hair on her head is harmed, your entire delegation will answer for it." The transition was immediate and chaotic. By 100 hours that afternoon, Cassian found himself officially transferred to the Royal Wing. The integration of human marines into the Alari Palace Protocol was going about as smoothly as a brick falling down a staircase. In the hallway outside Lyria's chambers, Cassian watched Corporal Kowalski, a marine the size of a vending machine, attempt to bow to a passing dignitary. Kowalski bent too low, his tactical vest creaking, and accidentally headbutted a floating sensor drone. "Easy, Kowalski," Cassian sighed, rubbing his temples. "It is a bow, not a tackle. Sorry, sir." Kowalski grunted, straightening his helmet. "These tall guys make me nervous. They just stare. And I swear I can hear them thinking about how ugly I am." "They are telepaths," Cassian reminded him. "They are probably hearing you think about how weird their knees are. Keep your mind on the mission. Eyes up." Cassian left the squad at the perimeter and entered the princess's ready room. Lyria was waiting for him. She was pacing, her bare feet making no sound on the crystal floor. When the door hissed shut, she spun around. "I think I made a mistake," she said breathlessly. Her markings were strobing rapid-fire blue and violet. "My uncle is furious. Varek is furious. The entire court is whispering that I have lost my mind." "You bought us time," Cassian said calmly. He set his helmet on a side table. "That was a brave thing you did in there." "I was not brave," she said, hugging her arms. "I was terrified. I could feel their anger. It felt like walking through a furnace." "But you did it anyway," Cassian said. "That is the definition of brave." He walked over to a secure console he had brought from the ship. "Now, we have a job to do. We have access to the royal servers, but the trail we found yesterday went dead at the firewall. If we want to find out who rigged that chandelier, we need to go where the digital trail leads physically." Lyria looked at the map he projected. It showed the lower levels of the station, the roots of the world tree. "The underlayers," she whispered. "I have never been there. It is forbidden." "Forbidden is just a fancy word for interesting," Cassian said. He opened a duffel bag and pulled out two objects. One was a standard human stealth cloak. The other was a holographic emitter collar. "Put this on," he said. It will mask your biosign and project a disguise. To anyone looking, you will just be another mid-level functionary. Lyria took the collar. Her fingers brushed his. And again, that spark of connection jumped between them. She looked up at him, her large dark eyes searching his face. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You could have stayed in the security of the delegation. This is treason against my government. If we are caught, they will execute you." Cassian checked the charge on his stun baton. "I don't like bullies, Your Highness. And I don't like people dropping chandeliers on women." Besides, he offered her a rare, dry half-smile. "You said I was sturdy. I have to live up to the reputation." The descent into the underlayers was like sinking into a deep ocean. The pristine, singing crystal of the upper palace gave way to darker, heavier materials. The air grew thick with the smells of recycled ozone, exotic spices, and damp biology. The lighting shifted from the golden glow of the nobility to the harsh, neon flickers of the working class. Cassian moved with the easy, rolling gait of a predator, his eyes scanning every shadow. Beside him, Lyria, disguised as a male clerk with dull gray skin, moved stiffly, overwhelmed by the sensory input. The architecture here was different. It was alive. They passed through a long, tubular corridor where the walls were made of a translucent, fleshy material that pulsed rhythmically. Lyria stopped, placing a hand against the wall. She gasped. "What is it?" Cassian asked, stepping close to her, his hand hovering near his weapon. It knows me," she whispered. The walls were pulsing in perfect synchronization with her own heartbeat. As her pulse quickened, the bioluminescence in the veins of the station flared brighter. "The station is grown, not built," Lyria explained, her voice trembling. "It responds to the royal bloodline. Usually, I am too far away, up in the spire. But down here, I am walking inside the veins of the beast." Cassian watched the walls thrum. It was unsettling. It made the station feel less like a machine and more like a massive, slumbering god. "Keep your heart rate down," he murmured. "We don't want to announce your presence by lighting up the hallway." They pushed deeper. The market district was a chaotic sprawl of stalls and makeshift shops. Holographic advertisements screamed in 3 languages. Vendors sold everything from unauthorized memory crystals to gene-spliced pets. A hybrid merchant with mechanical eyes watched them pass, his gaze lingering on Cassian's weapon. Cassian stared him down until the merchant looked away. "The signal trace leads here," Cassian said, checking his scanner. "Down that maintenance shaft." The shaft was narrow, crowded with pipes and bundles of optic fibers. It forced them close together. Cassian went first, clearing the way. But at a junction, the space became so tight they had to squeeze past a massive heat exchanger. They ended up pressed chest to chest in the semi-darkness. Cassian froze. He could feel the heat of her body through the thin fabric of her disguise. He could smell the scent of her, like rain on hot stone and something sweet, like night-blooming flowers. Lyria looked up at him. In the dark, her holographic disguise flickered and failed for a second, revealing her true face. Her eyes were wide, luminous, and terrified. But it wasn't just fear. Her control slipped. Cassian felt a sudden phantom sensation in his own mind. It wasn't a voice, but a wash of pure emotion, loneliness. It hit him like a physical blow. He saw flashes, images that weren't his. A small girl sitting alone in a vast crystal room. A teenager being told to stop crying, to stop feeling, to be a mirror and not a person. A crushing weight of expectation. The feeling of being a precious object that everyone wanted to own but no one wanted to know. Cassian's chest tightened. The empathy was overwhelming. He wanted to wrap his arms around her, to shield her from the coldness of her own life. He realized his breathing had hitched. His heart was hammering against his ribs, and he knew she could feel it. "Your Highness," he rasped, his voice rougher than he intended. "If you push any harder, you are going to find out exactly how unsturdy my knees really are." It was a joke, meant to break the tension, but it landed heavy. Lyria gasped and jerked back, slamming her shoulder against the pipes. "I am sorry," she whispered, horrified. I did not mean to touch you like that. It is forbidden. It is invasive." She turned and scrambled away down the tunnel, fleeing from him, fleeing from herself. "Lyria, wait!" Cassian hissed, going after her. She didn't stop until they reached a ventilation grate overlooking a vast, hollowed-out cargo bay. She was huddled against the wall, her hands over her ears, her markings flashing a frantic, jagged white. Cassian approached her slowly, hands raised. "I am not angry," he said softly. "You should be," she said, her voice shaking. "I violated your mind. I made you feel things you did not choose. This is why I am dangerous. This is why they keep me isolated. I leak. I cannot stop it." Cassian crouched down beside her. He didn't touch her, but he stayed close. "You didn't violate anything," he said. "You just shared. Humans do it too. Lyria, we just use words. We are clumsier about it, but the feeling is the same." He looked through the grate. "And right now, I need you to put those walls back up, because we found them." Lyria took a shuddering breath. She wiped her eyes and looked where he was pointing. Below them, on a suspended platform in the center of the cargo bay, 3 figures were meeting. Cassian pulled a small device from his belt, a sonic lattice hacker. He attached it to the grate and handed Lyria an earpiece. The audio crackled to life. One figure was a human, rough-looking, wearing the coat of a freelance smuggler. The second was a tall Ilari in the robes of the Purity cult, a fanatical religious sect that believed non-telepathic species were soulless. The third figure was masked, wearing high noble robes that shimmered with expensive distorters. "Payload is ready," the smuggler was saying. His voice was gravelly. "But the security on the diplomatic deck is tighter since the chandelier drop. The human liaison is sniffing around." "He will be dealt with," the masked noble said. His voice was synthesized, unrecognizable. The chandelier was merely a test of the gravity overrides. "The real strike must be decisive. We cannot kill the princess," the cult priest hissed. "She is the vessel. We do not need to kill her," the noble replied. "We need to break her. When the human diplomat is assassinated, using human weapons, the shock will shatter her fragile control. She will cause a psychic event. The court will deem her unstable. We will step in as regents for the invalid empress, and the treaty will burn." Lyria's hand flew to her mouth. They were not just planning a coup, they were planning to dismantle her mind. "We have heard enough," Cassian whispered. "We need to get this recording too." A screech of feedback tore through their earpieces. Below them, the masked noble looked up directly at the ventilation grate. "We have listeners," the noble said calmly. "Kill them." Cassian cursed. He grabbed Lyria's arm. "Run!" They bolted back down the tunnel just as a plasma bolt blew the grate inward. The chase was a blur of motion and noise. They burst out of the service tunnels into a zero-gravity loading zone. Floating cargo containers drifted like massive, rusted icebergs. "Jump!" Cassian yelled. He grabbed Lyria and launched them off a catwalk. They soared through the air, weightless. Cassian fired his grapple line, swinging them around a massive crate just as laser fire stitched the air where they had been. 3 mercenaries equipped with gravity boots were pursuing them, running along the walls and ceilings. Cassian twisted in midair, firing his stun pistol. He hit one mercenary, sending him spinning away into the void. "Lyria, 7 o'clock." A mercenary dropped from the ceiling, a vibro blade in hand. He was too close for Cassian to aim. Lyria screamed. She didn't use a weapon. She threw her hand out, palm forward. A ripple of visible force, purple and terrifying, erupted from her. It wasn't just telekinesis. It was a psychic scream made manifest. The blast hit the mercenary. He didn't just fly back, he convulsed. He clutched his head, screaming in a voice that sounded like tearing metal. Blood poured from his nose and ears as he was slammed into a bulkhead with bone-shattering force. He slid down the wall, motionless. Silence fell over the bay. The other mercenaries retreated, terrified by the display of royal power. Cassian grabbed a floating handle and pulled them toward an airlock. He cycled it open and shoved Lyria inside, hitting the seal. Inside the small transition chamber, gravity returned. Lyria collapsed to the floor, then she was staring at her hands. They were glowing with a violent, unstable light. "I killed him," she whispered. "I felt his mind snap. I felt it happen." "We are alive," Cassian said. He was breathing hard, checking the door seal. "That is what matters." "No!" She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "You do not understand. I am a weapon. That is all I am. If I lose control, I destroy people." Cassian holstered his weapon. He walked over to her, knelt, and took her glowing hands in his. "You defended yourself," he said firmly. "There is a difference." He pulled her up. "We can't stay here. I know a place." The safe house was an old observation dome on the outer rim of the station, a relic from the construction phase. It was officially abandoned, its life support running on auxiliary power. It was quiet. Outside the panoramic glass, the rings of Typhon spun in slow, majestic silence. The starlight was cold and clear. Lyria sat on a crate, wrapped in a thermal blanket Cassian had found. She had stopped crying, but she was shivering. Cassian sat on the floor a few feet away, field stripping his pistol. The rhythmic click-snap of the metal parts was the only sound in the room. "Tell me a story," Lyria said suddenly. Her voice was small. Cassian paused. "What kind of story?" "A true one. You said you carry stones. Show me one. Please. I need to hear something that isn't my own fear." Cassian looked at her. The disguise collar lay on the floor. She was herself again, pale, luminous, and hauntingly beautiful. He set the pistol down. "There was a moon called Acheron," he began quietly. "It was ice and rock. We were pinned down in a crater for 3 days. My sergeant, Miller, he was the best of us. He told jokes when we were starving. He kept us warm. He looked out at the stars. When the enemy breached the perimeter, I froze, just for a second, but in war, a second is a lifetime. Miller pushed me out of the way. He took the round meant for me." Lyria listened, her aura reaching out, but gently this time. She felt the cold of that moon. She felt the hollow ache in his chest. "I thought I was a coward," Cassian said. "I thought because I felt fear, I was weak. But Miller, before he died, he told me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It is the decision that fear doesn't get to drive." He looked at Lyria. "You are terrified of your power. You are terrified of what you did back there. Good. That means you are not a monster. A monster wouldn't care." Lyria let the blanket slip from her shoulders. She moved off the crate and sat on the floor next to him. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was rough, scarred from burns and cuts, Her hand was smooth, cool, and alien. "It is strange," she whispered. "What is?" "Around everyone else. I have to fight to hold it in. It takes all my strength just to keep the dam from breaking. But around you." She traced the line of a scar on his knuckle. "My control slips. But I do not feel like I am going to explode. I feel safe." Cassian looked at their joined hands. The contrast was stark. War and peace, iron and glass. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Because you are honest," she said. "You do not hide your pain. You do not pretend to be perfect. And your mind, it is quiet. It lets me rest." She looked up at him. They were very close now. The starlight caught the gold flecks in her eyes, making them look like galaxies. Cassian felt a pull that had nothing to do with gravity. It was a magnetic, biological imperative. He wanted to lean in. He wanted to kiss the fear away from her mouth. He reached up, his hand trembling slightly, and brushed a strand of silver hair away from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek. Her skin was incredibly soft. Lyria leaned into his touch. Her eyes fluttered shut. Her markings shifted to a soft, warm amber, the color of sunlight. "Cassian." She breathed. He leaned in. Their breath mingled. Beep, beep, beep. The harsh electronic chirp of Cassian's comms unit shattered the moment like a hammer hitting glass. Cassian jerked back. Lyria flinched. He swore softly and tapped the unit. "Ward, go!" It was Kowalski. His voice was panicked. "Sir, you need to get back to the upper levels. Now! It's bad! Report!" Cassian barked, the soldier instantly replacing the man. "Ambassador Higgins just got fished out of an airlock override. He's alive, but barely. And sir, the local net is flooding with messages. Encrypted channels are leaking data." "What kind of data?" Kowalski hesitated. "Sir, they're posting logs of your movements. They're saying the princess is compromised, that she's mentally unstable due to excessive biological interface with a human. They're calling it a corruption of the bloodline." Cassian looked at Lyria. She had heard it too. The amber light in her skin died, replaced by a cold, sickly gray. "The trap," Lyria whispered. "It wasn't just to kill the diplomat. It was to destroy my reputation, to make our connection a crime." Cassian stood up, pulling Lyria to her feet. "Let's go," he said, his voice hard. "Where?" she asked. "Back to the lion's den," Cassian said. Before they decide to lock the doors, they moved toward the exit, leaving the sanctuary of the dome behind. The moment of peace was gone. The conspiracy had played its next card, and it was a winning hand. They were not just hunters anymore. They were the hunted, and the scandal was a weapon more dangerous than any plasma bolt. The atmosphere within the Alari orbital palace had shifted. Before the chandelier incident, the air had been filled with the effervescent hum of curiosity and tentative diplomacy. Now, 3 days later, the air tasted of ozone and static, heavy with the weight of things unsaid. Rumors on an Alari station were not merely spoken, they were felt. They moved through the empathic lattice of the population like a low-frequency vibration in the floorboards. To the sensitive Alari courtiers, the palace was buzzing with scandalous whispers about the princess and her human pet. To Cassian Ward, who lacked the biology to hear the psychic chatter, it simply manifested as a sudden, suffocating isolation. He walked down the corridor of the diplomatic wing, his boots striking the floor with a rhythmic thud that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. He approached the security checkpoint for the council spire. The Alari guard, a towering figure in iridescent chitin armor, did not look at him. He simply held up a hand. "Access denied," the guard said. The voice was flat, synthesized through a translator helm. Cassian frowned. I have level 4 clearance. I am the princess's personal liaison. Directives have been updated, the guard replied. The council is in closed session. No non-Elari personnel are permitted beyond this perimeter. Cassian stared at the guard's impassive helmet. He could feel the hostility radiating off the alien, a cold prickle on the back of his neck. It was the same feeling he had felt in the data room, the ghost of contempt. Understood, Cassian said, keeping his face neutral. He turned and walked away. He did not storm off. He did not argue. He was a professional, and he knew a containment maneuver when he saw one. They were boxing him in, slowly, subtly, stripping away his access and his utility until he was nothing more than a decoration in a uniform. In the public broadcasts, Regent Malcor was praising Princess Lyria's dignity and resilience in the face of the recent mechanical failures. He painted her as the jewel of the Empire, a beacon of stability. Privately, the walls were closing in. Cassian returned to his quarters in the human sector. The room was standard military luxury, gray walls, a gravity mesh bed, and a viewport that looked out into the black void away from the gas giant. It was stark and cold. He sat at the small desk and activated his terminal. The screen glowed with the stark blue light of the Human Systems Alliance interface. He pulled up a blank document. Header, request for reassignment. Subject, Liaison Officer C. Ward. Reason, compromised objectivity. Cassian stared at the blinking cursor. His hand hovered over the holographic keyboard. He replayed the events of the last 48 hours in his mind. The chase through the zero-gravity bay. The way Lyria had looked in the observation dome, wrapped in a thermal blanket, starlight catching the silver strands of her hair. The way her mind had touched his, tentative and terrified, seeking safety. He remembered the almost kiss. He remembered the pull of it, a magnetic force that defied physics. He squeezed his eyes shut. He was a liability. That was the hard, tactical truth. The conspiracy was using his presence to undermine her. They were painting her as unstable, tainted by her proximity to a human. If he stayed, he gave them ammunition. If he stayed, his own inability to navigate their psychic battlefield might get her killed. He was a soldier. His job was to protect the objective. If the best way to protect the objective was to remove himself from the equation, then that was the order he had to give. I am doing this for her, he told the empty room. He began to type. The words were formal, dry, and agonizing. He cited protocol differences. He cited stress fatigue. He lied with the efficiency of a man who had spent a lifetime burying his own desires beneath the bedrock of duty. While Cassian typed his own exile, Princess Lyria sat in the High Council chamber, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her fingers were numb. The room was circular, walls made of the living crystal that amplified the thoughts of those within. Today, the room felt like a cage of ice. Regent Malcor sat at the head of the obsidian table. Lord Varek sat opposite him. There were no other ministers. This was not a government meeting, it was a family intervention. We are concerned for you, Lyria, Malcor said. His voice was smooth, like oil sliding over glass. You have been erratic. The incident in the cargo bay. Using a psionic scream, it was unseemly. It suggests that your control is fracturing. I was defending myself, Lyria said. Her voice was steady, but her markings were a pale, washed-out violet. There were assassins. Uncle, Malcor waved a hand dismissively. Mercenaries and smugglers. The station is vast. Vermin find their way in. Security deals with them, but that is not why we are here. We are here to discuss your future. He gestured to Lord Varric. Varric leaned forward. He was handsome in the way a shark was handsome, sleek, predatory, and devoid of warmth. The Empire needs stability, Princess, Varric said. The rumors regarding you and the human pet are damaging morale. The purity sects are restless. To soothe them, we must present a united front. A union, Malcor clarified. A bond mating between you and Lord Varric. It will be announced at the end of the peace summit. Lyria felt the blood drain from her face. A bond mating was not just marriage. It was a psychic link, a permanent fusing of minds. To bond with Varric would be to let a viper into her soul. I cannot, Lyria whispered. The rite of bonding requires mutual resonance. I have none with Lord Varric. Resonance can be synthesized, Varric said, smiling thinly. Our apothecaries have excellent compounds to encourage receptivity. Lyria looked at her uncle. You would drug me? You would force this? I would save you from yourself, Malcor said. You are drifting, child. You are letting your emotions run wild, seduced by the primitive simplicity of that human. We will secure the treaty. Yes. But the humans will remain where they belong, on the periphery. Partners in trade, perhaps, but never equals, and certainly not in our beds. Lyria stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I will not agree to this. Malcor did not stand. He merely looked at her, and his eyes were flat and hard. Refusal is a dangerous path. Lyria, especially for those you claim to care about. Lyria froze. What do you mean? The human. Ward, Malcor said casually, examining his fingernails. He is a soldier. Soldiers lead dangerous lives. Airlocks malfunction. Gravity lifts fail. It would be a tragedy if your stubbornness resulted in an unfortunate accident for your liaison. He has already survived one fall. I doubt he would survive a second. The threat hit her like a physical slap. They were not just threatening her autonomy. They were holding Cassian's life against her throat. She felt the cold, slimy delight radiating from Varric. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed her fear. Lyria turned and walked toward the door. She moved stiffly, like a marionette whose strings were pulled too tight. Sit down, Lyria, Malcor commanded. I am leaving, she said. She reached the door. The sensors read her biosignature and hesitated. For a second, the door did not open. Lyria pushed. She did not push with her hands. She pushed with her mind. A wave of pure, distilled rage slammed into the door mechanism. The crystals in the wall shrieked. The heavy door didn't just slide open, it retracted so fast the metal groaned. Lyria stepped out into the corridor. Her control, the iron dam she had built over 20 years, was developing hairline fractures. She walked down the hallway. She was not crying. She was vibrating. As she passed a row of decorative biolights, they flared blindingly bright and then shattered, raining sparks onto the floor. A group of courtiers ahead of her stopped, staring. Lyria did not see them. She saw Varric's shark-like smile. She saw Cassian's body broken on the floor of the atrium. The gravity in the corridor fluctuated. For 3 seconds, the floor tilted 40 degrees to the left. The courtiers screamed, sliding into the wall. Lyria kept walking. Her feet stayed planted, anchored by the sheer mass of her anger. The walls of the palace, sensitive to the royal blood, groaned in sympathy. Deep in the station's keel, power relays tripped. She reached the lift to her quarters. She stepped inside and hit the button. As the doors closed, she slumped against the wall. She clamped her hands over her mouth to stifle a scream that would have shattered every window in the spire. Midnight. The station cycle had dimmed to the night simulation. The corridors were bathed in a low, blue standby light. The hum of the ventilation was the only sound. Lyria paced the length of her chamber. She had changed into a simple night tunic of gray silk. Her feet were bare. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, a curtain of silver. She could not stay here. The argument raged in her head. "Stay," Fear whispered. "If you go to him, you doom him. Malcor is watching. Varric is watching. Like, keep your head down. Survive. Go." Her heart screamed. "They will kill him anyway. They will use him as a lever until he breaks, and then they will discard him. If you do nothing, you are already dead." She stopped by the window. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass. Her markings were swirling in colors she had never seen before. A chaotic mix of bruised purple, angry crimson, and a deep, terrified gold. She remembered Cassian's voice in the dome. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is the decision that fear doesn't get to drive. He was leaving. She could feel it. She could sense the grim resolution in his mind, even across the distance of the station. He was preparing to sacrifice himself, not by dying, but by leaving. He was going to walk away to save her, and leave her alone with the sharks. "No," she whispered. She went to her wardrobe and pulled out a small metallic disc, a personal stealth field generator. It was prototype tech, designed for royal evasion protocols. She clipped it to her belt. She closed her eyes and focused. She gathered the storm inside her, the swirling chaos of her empathy, and she pulled it tight. She did not suppress it. She wrapped it around herself like a cloak. She tapped the device. Light bent around her. To the visual spectrum, she vanished. To the sensors. She was a heat haze, a glitch in the air. She opened her door and slipped out into the silent corridor. The walk to the human wing took 20 minutes. Every step was a battle against the urge to turn back. She passed patrols of guards, holding her breath as they walked right past her, their eyes sliding off her distorted silhouette. She reached the heavy blast door of the human sector. She slipped through as a service drone exited. She found his door, number 404. She deactivated the stealth field. She materialized in the dim hallway, visible, vulnerable, and trembling. Her hand hovered over the chime pad. If he turned her away, if he looked at her with that soldier's mask of duty, it would break her. She pressed the chime. The seconds dragged like hours. Then, the door hissed open. Cassian stood there. He was shirtless, wearing only loose regulation trousers. His hair was messy, his eyes bleary with exhaustion. He held a data pad in one hand, the transfer request still glowing on the screen. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the figure in the hallway. "Lyria?" he breathed. His voice was rough with sleep and shock. She stood there, her hands clutched at her chest. Her aura was not hidden. It was crashing against him, a physical pressure. It felt like a summer storm, electric, heavy, and desperate. "May I come in?" she whispered. Cassian stared at her. He looked down the empty hallway, then back at her wide, frightened eyes. He stepped back and keyed the door to seal. The lock engaged with a heavy clank. Lyria stepped into the room. It smelled of him, soap, sterile air, and the faint metallic tang of anxiety. She turned to face him. "What are you doing here?" Cassian asked, tossing the datapad onto the bed. "It's midnight. If you are seen—" "I know," she said. Her voice shook. "I know the risk. Malcor threatened you. He told me that if I did not submit to Varric, accidents would happen to you." Cassian's jaw tightened. He crossed his arms over his bare chest. "I figured as much. That is why I was drafting a transfer request. I am leaving. Lyria, I am getting out of your way so you can be safe." "No!" The word exploded out of her. She took a step toward him. The lights in the room surged, brightening intensely before dimming again. Don't you understand? She cried, tears spilling over her lashes. You cannot fix this by leaving. You cannot fix me by leaving. Lyria, Cassian started, stepping forward, his hands raised to calm her. She cut him off. I felt you pulling away, she said, her voice cracking. I felt you closing your mind, burying your heart under all that stone and duty. You think you are protecting me? You are abandoning me. She was crying openly now, her markings flaring a deep, raw indigo, the color of absolute vulnerability. I can't control it anymore. Cassian, she confessed, the words tumbling out. Not my heart, not how my mind reaches for yours. I tried. I tried to bury it. I tried to be the perfect princess, the statue they want me to be. But it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back to you. She pressed a hand to her chest, over her heart. I am drowning in this palace. You are the only thing that feels like air. And if you leave, if you choose to leave, I will suffocate. Cassian stood frozen. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the terror, yes, but he also saw the fierce, unyielding resolve. She had walked through a fortress of enemies to stand in his room and tell him the truth. She was not a damsel. She was a woman making a choice. The walls he had built, the soldiers' discipline, the chain of command, the fear of his own past, crumbled. They turned to dust. Cassian crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her yet. He stopped inches away, his body radiating heat. Is this what you want? He asked, his voice low and intense. Not what Malcor wants. Not what the treaty says. What you want. Lyria looked up at him. She saw the hunger in his eyes, the raw need he had been hiding behind his dry humor and silence. I want a choice, she whispered. And I choose this. I choose you. She stepped closer. Her chest brushed his. Cassian let out a ragged breath. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs traced the glowing markings on her cheekbones. As his skin touched hers, the connection snapped into place. It wasn't like before. It wasn't a brush or a leak. It was a floodgate opening. Cassian gasped. He didn't just feel her skin, he felt her soul. He felt the warmth of her affection, the sharp spike of her desire, the immense relief of finally being seen. And she felt him. She felt the awe he held for her. She felt the fierce, protective instinct that roared like a fire. She felt the love he had been too afraid to name. He lowered his head. Their lips met. It was not a tentative first kiss. It was desperate. It was the collision of 2 stars. Cassian groaned, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Lyria's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, deeper. The room responded to the psychic resonance. The gravity plating in the floor whined and softened. The heavy military boots Cassian had left by the door began to float, drifting inches off the ground. The datapad on the bed hovered. They were weightless. Cassian kissed her like he was drowning and she was oxygen. He kissed the corner of her mouth, her jaw, the sensitive hollow of her throat. Lyria arched into him, a sound escaping her throat that was half sob, half moan. Her aura expanded, filling the room, wrapping around Cassian's mind like warm starlight. It wasn't invasive. It was an embrace. It amplified every sensation. The touch of his hands on her waist felt electric. The roughness of his stubble against her skin felt incredibly grounding. I have you, he murmured against her skin. I have you. They moved toward the bed, not walking so much as drifting in the low gravity. They sank onto the mattress, the field settling around them. He paused, bracing himself on his elbows, looking down at her. Her hair was a halo of silver on the gray sheets. Her markings were glowing with a steady, rhythmic pulse of gold and rose. "You are sure?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Once we do this, there is no going back." Lyria reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. "I do not want to go back," she whispered. "I want to go forward." She pulled him down. The night became a blur of sensation. It was a shedding of armor. For Cassian, it was letting go of the vigilance that had defined his life for 20 years. For Lyria, it was letting go of the control that had been her cage. They explored each other with a hunger that was both fierce and reverent. When they finally joined, the psychic feedback was blinding. It was a feedback loop of pleasure and emotion, his feeling hers feeling his, until they didn't know where one ended and the other began. The biolights in the room pulsed in perfect sync with their combined heartbeat, turning the stark military quarters into a sanctuary of living light. Later, much later, the room was dim again. The gravity had returned to normal. Lyria lay with her head on Cassian's chest. His arm was draped over her, his hand resting possessively on her hip. She listened to the steady thrum of his heart. It was the most honest sound she had ever heard. Cassian stared up at the ceiling. He felt exhausted, but for the first time in years, he did not feel heavy. The stones he carried were still there, but he wasn't carrying them alone anymore. "I almost sent it," he said quietly. "The transfer request." "I know," Lyria murmured, her fingers tracing the scar on his chest. "You were trying to be noble. I was trying to be safe," he corrected. "I told myself it was for you, but part of it was for me. I was afraid that if I stayed, I would fail you, like I failed Miller." "You cannot fail me, Cassian," she said. "Unless you lie to me." He tightened his arm around her. "I won't lie. Not anymore. I love you, Lyria. It is inconvenient, it is dangerous, and it is probably treason. But I do." Lyria smiled against his skin. She felt the truth of it ringing in his mind like a bell. "I love you too," she whispered, "and I am done being afraid of it. Malcor wants me to be a weapon? Fine. But I will not be his weapon. I will be my own." Cassian kissed the top of her head. "So, what is the plan? We can't stay in this room forever." "We fight," Lyria said. Her voice had a new steel to it. "We let them think they have won. We let them think I am cowed. And then, we find the proof we need to burn their conspiracy to the ground." "Together?" Cassian asked. "Together," she promised. They lay there in the silence, holding on to the moment. They knew that outside this door, the galaxy was waiting to tear them apart. They knew the morning would bring trials and accusations. But in this dark, quiet room, they had forged something that no politics could break. They had chosen each other. In the hallway outside, high in the corner near the ventilation duct, a small speck of dust shifted. It was not dust. It was a microdrone, no larger than a fly. It had adhered to the ceiling hours ago, waiting. Its passive sensors had recorded the arrival. It had recorded the door opening. It had recorded the entry of the princess. And it had recorded the fact that she had not left. A tiny encrypted burst of data fired from the drone, traveling through the station's relay, bouncing off 3 satellites, and landing on a secure terminal in the Regent's spire. The message was 3 words long. Leverage confirmed. Proceed. The trap had snapped shut, but the conspirators did not realize that by closing the trap, they had forced the 2 most dangerous people on the station into the same corner. And they were about to find out what happened when you backed a soldier and a psychic into a corner together. The morning light on the Aelari station was simulated, a gradual brightening of the ambient bioluminescence that mimicked a sunrise over a temperate world. But to Cassian Ward, the air felt sharper, clearer than it had since his arrival. He walked Lyria back to the perimeter of the Royal Wing at 0600 hours. The corridors were mostly empty, save for the occasional maintenance drone humming along the ceiling. They did not hold hands. That would be suicide in the open. But the space between them was charged. It was a magnetic field of awareness. Every time Cassian shifted his weight, Lyria knew it. Every time Lyria took a breath, Cassian felt the rhythm of it in his own chest. At the junction where the Royal Guard stood posted, they stopped. "I should go back to the barracks," Cassian said. His voice was low, lacking the gravelly edge of exhaustion that usually defined it. He felt rested, despite having slept for less than 2 hours. Lyria looked up at him. Her markings were a soft, steady teal, the color of a calm sea. For the first time since he had met her, the chaotic flickering was gone. Her aura wasn't a storm anymore, it was a hum. A consistent note that resonated perfectly with the silence in his own mind. "You will be at the briefing at 0900, she asked. "I will be there," Cassian promised. He reached out, intending to shake her hand formally for the benefit of the cameras, but his fingers brushed against her wrist. The contact sent a spark through them both, not painful, but startling in its intensity. It was a flash of shared warmth, a memory of skin against skin, a whisper of the night before. Lyria's eyes widened, a small, shy smile touching her lips. She didn't pull away. "Be safe, Cassian," she whispered. "You too, Princess." As he walked away, Cassian realized he was smiling. He forced his face back into a neutral mask, but the feeling remained. He felt lighter. The stones he carried were still there, but for the first time, he wasn't looking at the ground, he was looking ahead. The peace did not last until breakfast. At 0830 hours, the station's klaxon screamed. Cassian was in the security hub, reviewing the overnight logs, when the red alert bathed the room in pulsing crimson light. "Status," he barked, already moving toward the door. "Major incident in Sector 4, a technician yelled, his hands flying over a holographic interface. "The defense grid has collapsed. We have a diplomatic shuttle, the Pax Terra, on final approach. Its guidance systems are offline. It is coming in too hot." Cassian swore. The Pax Terra was carrying the secondary human delegation. If it crashed, the peace talks ended in a fireball. He sprinted into the corridor. He didn't need to check his comms to know where Lyria was. He could feel her alarm spike in the back of his mind. A sharp, cold needle of fear. "Control core. Meet me there." He didn't speak the words, and she didn't send them, but the intention was clear. They converged on the engineering core from opposite directions. Lyria arrived flanked by 2 winded guards, her robes flying behind her. Cassian skid to a halt beside her, his breathing controlled. The core was a cavernous room dominated by a pillar of pulsing light. The station's brain. Technicians were running around in panic. "The gravity stabilizers are unresponsive," the chief engineer shouted. "The shuttle is going to impact the docking ring in 2 minutes. Lyria stepped up to the main console. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "Override the safeties," she commanded. "We cannot," the engineer cried. "The system is locked out. It is a logic loop. Someone introduced a virus." Cassian looked at the schematic on the wall. The shuttle was a red dot plummeting toward the station. "Manual reset," Cassian said, stepping up beside Lyria. "We have to bypass the logic core and route the power directly to the tractor beams. That requires 2 operators," the engineer stammered. "The synchronization must be perfect within a millisecond. No 2 minds can coordinate that fast. We can, Lyria said. She looked at Cassian. She didn't ask. She just reached out with her mind. Cassian lowered his mental walls. He let her in. The sensation was instantaneous. He saw the code cascading on the screen, but he also felt the flow of energy through the station's veins as if it were his own blood. He felt Lyria's intent, sharp, mathematical, and desperate. On my mark, Cassian said aloud, though he didn't need to. He grabbed the manual isolation levers. Lyria placed her hands on the interface crystals. 3, 2, 1. Mark. They moved in perfect unison. Cassian threw the levers, physically severing the infected logic nodes. In the exact same microsecond, Lyria pushed a surge of psychic command into the crystals, forcing the tractor beams to wake up. The station groaned. The lights flickered and died, then surged back to blinding brightness. On the main screen, the red dot of the shuttle jerked, slowed, and was caught in a web of blue energy just meters from the hull. The room erupted in cheers. Cassian let out a breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at Lyria. She was sagging against the console, exhausted but triumphant. We did it, she breathed. Before Cassian could answer, the doors hissed open. Regent Malcor strode in, followed by a squad of elite guard. Seize him, Malcor ordered, pointing a long, pale finger at Cassian. What? Lyria spun around, placing herself between Cassian and the guards. Uncle, he just saved the shuttle. We saved it. He saved nothing, Malcor spat. Look at the logs. The virus that disabled the grid utilized human coding syntax. And you, Princess, you bypassed security protocols to give him access to the core. I gave him access to save lives, Lyria cried. Or perhaps, Malcor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You gave him access because you are no longer in control of your own faculties. He gestured to the guards. Take Liaison Ward to the brig and escort the princess to the council chamber. It is time we addressed this corruption. The council chamber felt less like a courtroom and more like an execution block. Lyria stood alone in the center of the obsidian floor. The high seats were filled with the most powerful nobles of the Aelari Empire, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks of judgment. Malcor sat at the head, unmasked, his expression one of sorrowful duty. Cassian was not present. He was in a holding cell 5 levels down, but Lyria could feel him. He was pacing. He was angry. But mostly, he was sending her a steady, silent pulse of reassurance. Stand tall. Do not let them break you. We have reviewed the security footage from last night, Malcor announced. His voice echoed off the crystal walls. A hologram materialized in the center of the room. It was grainy, black and white security feed. It showed the corridor outside the human wing. It showed Lyria, looking disheveled and frantic, standing at Cassian's door. It showed the door opening. It showed her entering. A ripple of shock went through the assembled nobles. Whispers of scandal and impurity hissed through the air. Princess, Malcor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We understand that humans possess crude, manipulative pheromones. We understand that this soldier has preyed upon your empathy, twisting your fragile mind until you violated the most sacred laws of our caste. He leaned forward. Admit that you were coerced. Admit that he used some form of psychological or chemical influence to lure you there. If you do this, we can treat you. We can cleanse you. And the human will be removed for his crimes against the crown. Lyria looked at the footage. She looked at the image of herself, terrified, desperate, seeking sanctuary. She looked at her uncle. She felt the smug satisfaction radiating off him like heat from a pavement. He thought he had won. He thought she would choose her reputation over her heart. He thought she would sacrifice Cassian to save her dignity. The silence stretched. "I will not," Lyria said. The whispers stopped. Malcor blinked. "You will not what?" "I will not lie," Lyria said. Her voice started quiet, but it grew stronger with every word. "I was not coerced. I was not drugged. I was not manipulated." She raised her head, her markings flaring a brilliant, defiant gold. "I went to his quarters because I chose to. I went because for my entire life, I have been told that my power is a curse, that my emotions are a liability, and that I must be a statue to be a queen. Cassian Ward is the only person in this station who sees me as a living being, not a political asset." She turned to face the council. "You speak of purity? You speak of tradition? While you plot in the shadows, sabotaging your own station, risking the lives of diplomats, all to hold on to power? That is not purity. That is rot." She pointed at the hologram. "Yes, I went to him. I love him. And that love does not make me weak. Uncle, it makes me incorruptible. Because now I know the difference between a duty that protects our people and a duty that merely protects your throne." Pandemonium erupted. Nobles shouted. Malcor stood, his face twisting in genuine fury. "You admit it?" he roared. "You admit to this perversion?" "I admit to an alliance," Lyria shot back, her voice cutting through the noise. "An alliance of trust. Something you would know nothing about." Malcor slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You are compromised. You are unfit to lead. You are unfit to—" "If you arrest me," Lyria said, her voice ice cold, "the station's living metal will know. The palace responds to the rightful heir. Do you want to see what happens to the life support systems if I scream?" The lights overhead surged dangerously bright. The floor trembled. Malcor froze. He looked at the flickering lights. He looked at the nobles who were now looking at him with fear. He realized he had pushed her too far. If he arrested her now, she might tear the station apart with her mind. He sat down slowly. "Very well," he said, his voice tight. "Since you claim this, connection is an asset, perhaps we should test it." He smiled, and it was the smile of a trap snapping shut. "The sabotage to the grid originated from an off-world signal. We have traced it to the moon of Xylos. It is a forbidden zone, a place of ancient, unstable psychic resonance." He gestured to the map. "If you and your human are such a potent team, you will go there. You will investigate this source. You will bring us proof of who is truly behind these attacks. Until you return with answers, you are banished from the council. And if you do not return, well, then the Empire will mourn its tragic martyr. It was a death sentence. Xylos was known as the Moon of Ghosts. Ships that went there rarely came back." Lyria did not hesitate. "Release Liaison Ward," she said, "and prepare a ship." The Silent Runner was a small, sleek stealth cruiser, designed for 2 pilots. It slipped out of the docking bay an hour later, heading away from the gas giant and toward the dark, jagged rock of Xylos. Cassian sat in the pilot's seat, checking the weapons array. He was silent. "I am sorry," Lyria said from the co-pilot's chair. She was watching the stars streak by. "I put you in danger. Again." Cassian chuckled dryly. "Princess, you stood in front of the entire council and told them you loved me. You could fly this ship directly into a sun right now, and I would probably die happy." Lyria looked at him, a blush coloring her cheeks violet. "It was impulsive. It was the bravest thing I have ever seen," Cassian said. He reached over and took her hand. "Now, Let's go find these ghosts and get back home. Xylos was a nightmare of beauty. The moon had no atmosphere to speak of, but the ancient Ilari terraforming engines were still running in erratic loops, creating pockets of breathable air and localized gravity. Cassian landed the ship on a ridge overlooking a valley of crystalline forests. The trees were not wood. They were towering spires of translucent quartz that hummed in the wind. Floating boulders, caught in anti-gravity eddies, drifted through the sky like lazy clouds. The dust on the ground was luminous. Every time they took a step, the dust swirled up, glowing in response to their bioelectric fields. "This place is alive," Lyria whispered as they walked down the ramp. She adjusted the enviro seal on her collar. "I can hear it. It is whispering." "Keep your shields up," Cassian warned, scanning the perimeter with his rifle. "Malcor sent us here because he thinks the environment will kill us." They tracked the signal through the crystal forest. The deeper they went, the stranger the physics became. At the entrance to a canyon, the air shimmered. "Halt!" A voice boomed. A massive figure materialized from the dust. It was a holographic guardian, an ancient construct of hard light and memory. It wore the armor of the First Dynasty. "Identify," the guardian demanded. Its eyes burned with blue fire. "Princess Lyria of the House Ilari," Lyria said, stepping forward. "False," the guardian roared. "The blood is pure. You carry the taint of the alien." The guardian raised a massive hammer of solidified light and swung. "Move!" Cassian yelled. He tackled Lyria, rolling them into the cover of a quartz tree. The hammer struck the ground where they had stood, shattering the rock with a deafening crack. Cassian came up firing. His plasma rounds struck the guardian, flaring harmlessly against its shields. "It's energy," Cassian shouted. "Physical attacks won't work. It is testing me," Lyria realized. She stood up, exposing herself. "Lyria, get down!" "No!" Lyria yelled. She walked toward the giant. The guardian raised its hammer again. "You are weak," it boomed. "You have bonded with the dust. You are not fit to rule." "I am not here to rule," Lyria shouted back, her voice amplified by her telepathy. "I am here to serve." She didn't attack. She projected. She threw a wave of emotion at the construct, not rage, not fear, but pure, unadulterated compassion. She showed it her grief for the war. She showed it her love for Cassian. She showed it the truth of her heart. The hammer paused in midair. The guardian froze. The blue fire in its eyes flickered and turned soft white. "Strength is not solitude," Lyria whispered. "Strength is unity." The guardian lowered the hammer. It bowed, slowly, and dissolved back into the luminous dust. Cassian let out a breath he had been holding for 10 seconds. He lowered his rifle. "You talked it to death?" he asked, impressed. "I reasoned with it," Lyria said, wiping sweat from her brow. "It was programmed to weed out the cruel. My ancestors. They were wiser than Malcor." A psychic storm hit them an hour later. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind began to howl with the voices of the dead. Gravity went haywire. They took shelter in a shallow cave halfway up a cliff. Inside, the gravity fluctuations caused droplets of heated water from a thermal vent to float in the air, creating a galaxy of liquid stars around them. They huddled together for warmth. Cassian pulled out 2 ration packs from his pack. "Ilari rations," he grumbled, examining the seamless silver pouch. "How do you even open these? There is no tab. There is no zipper. It is just a brick of frustration." Lyria laughed. The sound was bright and clear, bouncing off the cave walls. "Here," she said. She didn't touch the pack. She just flicked her finger. The silver foil peeled back elegantly, revealing the nutrient bars inside. "Show off," Cassian muttered, taking the bar. They ate in silence, watching the storm rage outside. The floating water droplets refracted the light from Lyria's markings, casting dancing patterns on the walls. Cassian finished his meal and looked at her. She was wrapped in a thermal cloak, her silver hair spilling over the dark fabric. She looked ethereal, but her eyes were warm and human. He reached out and traced the line of bioluminescence running down her arm. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. "When they flare, sometimes," she admitted. "When I fight it, when I try to hold it in, it burns. But with you..." She took his hand and placed it on her cheek. "With you, it feels like breathing." She turned her face and kissed the palm of his hand. Then she traced the scar over his eyebrow. "Tell me about this one," she whispered. "Shrapnel," Cassian said. "From a grenade that landed too close. I was 19. I thought I was invincible. And this one..." She touched a jagged white line on his neck. "Knife fight, Neo Soul. I learned that day that I am not invincible." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "You are to me," she whispered. She kissed him. It was slow and deep, tasting of nutrient bars and ozone. In the floating field of the cave, with the storm screaming outside, they held onto each other. There was no desperate urgency this time, just the quiet, bone-deep certainty of two people who had found their home in a hostile universe. "I am not afraid of your power, Lyria," Cassian said against her lips. "I never was. I was only afraid you would burn yourself out trying to protect everyone else. I have you to ground me now," she said. "You are my anchor." The storm broke by morning. They pushed onto the summit. The ruin was there. It was a massive amphitheater of white stone, untouched by time. In the center, pulsing with a dark, rhythmic beat, was a living crystal core. "This is it," Lyria said, checking her scanner. "The signal is coming from inside the core. It is a transmitter." She approached the crystal. It was 10 feet tall, glowing with trapped memories. She placed her hands on it. Images flooded her mind. She gasped. "Cassian," she said, her voice tight. "This isn't just a transmitter. It is a library. Records from the Third Dynasty." She pulled the data, projecting it into the air. Holographic scenes played out. A queen, ancient and terrible, sitting on a throne, advisors whispering in her ear. They were torturing her, not physically but emotionally, killing her pets, isolating her, feeding her paranoia. They were driving her insane, Cassian realized, watching the horror. They were weaponizing her, Lyria said, horror dawning on her face. A stable empath creates peace. An unstable empath creates chaos. A weapon of mass destruction that can wipe out entire fleets with a thought. She looked at Cassian. "That is what Malcor wants. He doesn't want me to lead. He wants to break me. He wants to turn me into a bomb he can aim at the human worlds." "We have the proof," Cassian said. "Download it. We take this back to the council, and Malcor is finished." Lyria nodded. She sank her mind into the core, initiating the transfer. The moment she connected, the trap sprang. The core didn't just give data, it screamed a failsafe, triggered by her connection, unleashed a psychic backlash. It wasn't a computer virus, it was a concentrated blast of pure, distilled despair left behind by the Mad Queen. Lyria screamed, her back arched. Her eyes rolled back, glowing pure white. Her aura exploded outward, knocking Cassian off his feet. The ground shook. The floating rocks crashed down. "Lyria!" Cassian roared, scrambling up. He tried to run to her, but the psychic pressure was like walking into a hurricane wind. It pushed him back, making his nose bleed, making his vision blur. "I hate." Lyria's voice wasn't hers. It was distorted, layered with 1,000 screams. Kill them all. She was drowning. The echo was rewriting her mind, overriding her personality with ancient madness. Cassian gritted his teeth. He forced one foot forward and then another. He didn't have telepathy. He didn't have shields. He just had stubbornness. Lyria, listen to me. He reached her. The energy burned his hands, singing his uniform. He grabbed her wrists. Look at me. She looked, but there was no recognition in the white void of her eyes. Cassian didn't let go. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers, ignoring the pain that felt like a drill in his skull. You are not a weapon, he shouted. You are Lyria. You open ration packs with your mind because you are lazy. You laugh when I trip. You chose me. He poured everything he had into the contact, not psychic power, but memory. He remembered the smell of her hair. He remembered the feeling of her hand in his. He remembered the way she had looked at him in the doorway, terrified and brave. Come back to me, Lyria gasped. Deep in the white void, a spark of gold flared. The anchor held. She gripped his hands. She drew on his stability, his unyielding gray silence. She used it as a shield to batter back the madness. No! She screamed at the core. She ripped her hands away, tearing the connection. The backlash exploded upward, a beam of pure psionic energy shooting into the sky, piercing the clouds and rippling out into space. Lyria collapsed into Cassian's arms. Silence returned to the ruin. Cassian checked her pulse. It was racing but strong. Her eyes fluttered open. The black and gold nebulae were back. I got it, she whispered, holding up a data crystal she had materialized from the Matrix. I have the proof. Cassian hugged her tight, burying his face in her neck. You scared the hell out of me, princess. I know, she murmured weakly. She looked up at the sky, where the beam had dissipated. But we have a problem, Cassian. What? That shockwave? She said grimly. It just hit the palace sensors. Malcor knows we survived, and he knows exactly where we are. Cassian looked at the sky. He helped her to her feet. Then we better get to the ship, he said, because I have a feeling the welcome committee is on its way. The docking clamps of the orbital palace engaged with a shudder that vibrated through the hull of the silent runner. Cassian Ward sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting lightly on the controls, but his eyes were scanning the external camera feeds. The welcome was wrong. Usually, the docking ring was a bustle of automated drones and bored customs officials. Today, it was a gauntlet. 2 rows of elite guards stood rigid in the airlock, their iridescent armor gleaming under harsh white floodlights. Behind them, heavy suppression turrets tracked the movement of the small stealth ship. Cassian glanced at Lyria. She was standing by the viewport, her spine straight, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked regal, but he could see the tension in the set of her jaw. Her aura was tight, pulled in close to her body like a shield. They know, Cassian said quietly. Malcor knows we have the data. He is afraid, Lyria replied. She turned to him, her eyes dark and luminous. I can feel it radiating from the station itself. The fear is thick enough to taste. He has tightened his grip because he knows it is slipping. Cassian stood up and checked the charge on his stun baton. He adjusted the collar of his uniform, hiding the scorch marks from the psychic storm on Xylos. Stay behind me, he said. Until we know the play. The play became obvious the moment the airlock cycled open. Commander Terran of the Palace Guard stepped forward. He did not salute. Princess Lyria, Terran said, his voice amplified by his helmet. You are to accompany us immediately to the Grand Assembly Hall. The Regent has convened an emergency session regarding your conduct. And my liaison? Lyria asked, her voice cool. The commander looked at Cassian with undisguised contempt. The prisoner will accompany us. He is the primary exhibit. Cassian felt a spike of anger, not for himself, but for the disrespect shown to her. He took a step forward, but Lyria placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was a silent command. "Wait. We will go," Lyria said. The walk to the assembly hall was a march through a palace on the edge of a knife. The corridors were silent. The usual courtiers were gone, replaced by patrols of armed drones. The air felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Cassian's arms stand up. Whispers of a coup were not just rumors anymore. They were a physical pressure. Cassian noted that the human security details usually stationed at the checkpoints were missing. Malcor had already purged the ranks. They reached the massive double doors of the Grand Assembly. The doors groaned open, revealing a cavernous amphitheater packed with thousands of Elari nobles, military officers, and a clustered, nervous group of human diplomats. In the center of the room, raised on a dais of obsidian, sat Regent Malcor. He looked down at them like a god judging insects. "Bring them forward," Malcor commanded. Cassian and Lyria were marched to the center of the floor. The lights dimmed, leaving them in a spotlight of harsh brilliance. "Citizens of the Empire." Malcor's voice boomed, magnified by the acoustic crystals of the hall. "We stand at a precipice. For weeks, we have sought peace with the humans. We have opened our doors. We have shared our air. And how have they repaid us?" He pointed a long, pale finger at Cassian. "With subversion, with manipulation. This man, this soldier, was sent here not to protect, but to corrupt. He has targeted the most vulnerable among us. He has used psychological warfare to twist the mind of your princess, to destabilize her empathic balance, and to turn her against her own blood." A murmur of outrage rippled through the crowd. Cassian saw Ambassador Higgins in the front row, looking pale and sweating profusely. Malcor stood up. He activated a holographic projector. Above the hall, edited footage began to play. It showed the moment from the night before, Lyria entering Cassian's room. It showed the door closing. But the audio had been doctored. It layered low, sinister tones over the image, making Lyria look drugged, confused, stumbling into a trap. "He has bewitched her," Malcor declared. "He has exploited her fragility to gain access to our security grid, to our secrets. He is a parasite." Malcor turned his gaze to Lyria. His expression softened into a mask of pity. "Princess," he said gently, "we know you are not yourself. We know he has clouded your judgment. But you can end this. Denounce him. Tell the assembly that he manipulated you. Tell us that your loyalty remains with your people, and we will show you mercy. We will heal you." The hall held its breath. Thousands of eyes fixed on Lyria. The pressure was enormous, the weight of centuries of tradition, the expectation of purity, the terrifying shame of public exposure. Cassian looked at her. He wanted to tell her to do it. He wanted to tell her to save herself, and he was a soldier. He was expendable. She was the future. But Lyria did not look at Malcor. She looked at Cassian. Her eyes were clear. The nebulous gold flecks in her irises were swirling with a slow, powerful rhythm. She reached out with her mind, and he felt it, a touch as light as a feather but as solid as steel. "I am done hiding," she thought. Lyria turned to the regent. She did not shout. She did not cry. She simply reached out and took Cassian's hand. She interlaced her fingers with his. The gasp from the audience was audible. To touch a human so intimately in public was a violation of every social code the Aelari held. "I will not denounce him," Lyria said. Her voice was not amplified, but it carried to the back of the hall, carried by the sheer force of her will. Malkor's eyes narrowed. You choose the alien over your duty? I choose the truth over your lies, Lyria replied. She squeezed Cassian's hand, and her aura flared. It did not flicker with the chaotic fear of the past. It exploded outward in a wave of brilliant, blinding teal and gold. It washed over the front rows, hitting the nobles with a physical wave of emotion. They flinched, expecting chaos. Instead, they felt resolve. They felt a profound, unshakable clarity. They felt the truth of her heart, stripped of all artifice. Cassian Ward is not a corrupter, Lyria announced. He is my shield. He is my ally. And he is the only man in this room brave enough to stand against the rot that is eating this empire from the inside. She reached into her robe and pulled out the data crystal from Xylos. You speak of history. Uncle, let us look at history. She threw the crystal into the air. She hit it with a pulse of telekinetic force. The crystal shattered, but the data did not fall. It expanded. The holographic projectors of the hall were hijacked. The edited footage of the bedroom vanished, replaced by the jagged, terrifying memories of the Mad Queen from the Third Dynasty. The hall filled with images of torture, of a monarch being driven insane by whispering advisors, of entire star systems burning because an unstable empath had been weaponized. This is what the Regent wants, Lyria shouted, her voice rising. He does not want a queen. He wants a bomb. He has been replicating the ancient protocols, the accidents, the stress, the isolation. It was all designed to break my mind so he could aim me at his enemies. The images shifted. Now they showed the recording from the cargo bay, Malkor's masked conspirators discussing the assassination of the human diplomat, the plan to frame the humans, the plan to enslave Lyria. The crowd erupted. The truth was undeniable. It was there in high-definition audio, in the Regent's own encrypted codes. Malkor stood frozen on the dais, his mask of benevolent authority cracked, revealing the snarling predator beneath. "Kill them!" Malkor screamed. He slammed his hand onto a hidden console on his podium. The time for subtlety was over. Throughout the hall, the decorative pillars shifted. Panels slid open to reveal automated defense turrets. The eyes of the drones turned from blue to a hostile red. At the same time, a high-pitched whine tore through the air. It was the purity signal. Cassian grabbed his head as the sound hit him, but for the Elari, it was agony. The signal was a chaotic, dissonant frequency designed to scramble the empathic lattice. All around the room, nobles collapsed, clutching their skulls. Guards dropped their weapons, screaming as their minds were flooded with white noise and artificial rage. The hall dissolved into chaos. "Marines!" Cassian roared, his voice cutting through the panic. "Defensive formation. Protect the civilians." The human security detail, who had been disarmed but not removed, scrambled for the weapons of the fallen guards. Corporal Kowalski tackled a screaming Alari diplomat out of the path of a drone blast. Cassian drew his stun baton and his service pistol. "Lyria, we have to stop the signal." Lyria was on her knees, her hands pressed to her temples. Her aura was shredding, flickering wildly under the assault of the noise. "The signal," she gasped. "It is coming from the throne hall, the amplifier. He is going to the amplifier." Cassian looked up. Malkor was gone. The dais was empty. Cassian grabbed Lyria, hauling her to her feet. "Can you move?" She looked at him, her eyes streaming with tears of pain. "With you," she whispered, "always." "Move!" Cassian commanded. They sprinted out of the assembly hall, into the corridor. The palace was a war zone. The gravity generators were fluctuating wildly as the station's central computer struggled with the conflicting commands. One moment, they were running on the floor. The next, gravity shifted 90 degrees, and they were running on the wall. Cassian didn't slow down. He adapted instantly, his magnetic boots locking onto the surface. He fired behind him, taking out a pursuing drone with a precision shot to its sensor array. Lyria ran beside him. She couldn't focus enough to use her telekinesis, but she used her empathy to sense the ambushes. "3 ahead," she shouted, pointing around a corner. Cassian slid across the polished floor, firing before he even saw the targets. 3 purity cultists, armed with energy pikes, dropped before they could raise their weapons. They reached the massive golden doors of the throne hall. The doors were sealed. Cassian looked at Lyria. "Together," he said. He planted explosive charges on the hinges. Lyria focused her mind, gathering every scrap of will she had left to create a telekinetic shield around them. Fire in the hole. The explosion blew the doors inward. They stepped through the smoke into the throne hall. It was a cathedral of light. The ceiling vaulted hundreds of meters high, leading to a spire that pierced the hull of the station. In the center sat the emerald throne, and upon it sat Malcor. He was wearing the crown of echoes. It was an ancient device, a halo of jagged metal and glowing circuitry that plugged directly into the station's empathic core. It amplified his thoughts 1,000 times over. He looked at them. His eyes were glowing with a terrifying, unnatural power. "You are too late," Malcor's voice boomed. It didn't come from his mouth, it came from the air itself, vibrating in their bones. He raised a hand. Cassian flew backward. It wasn't a physical blow. It was a wave of kinetic force generated by Malcor's amplified mind. Cassian slammed into a pillar, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He crumpled to the floor, his pistol sliding away. "Cassian!" Lyria screamed. She turned to her uncle, her hands raising to strike. Malcor merely looked at her. "Kneel," he commanded. The word was a hammer. Lyria's knees hit the floor. She couldn't help it. The command bypassed her ears and went straight to her motor cortex. The crown gave him absolute dominion over the royal blood. "You thought you could defy me?" Malcor sneered. "Standing up, the crown pulsing with violet light. You are nothing. You are a vessel. You were born to serve the Empire, and if you will not serve willingly, you will serve as a puppet." He stepped down from the dais. "I will strip your mind, Lyria. I will peel away your memories, your personality, your little human love affair. I will leave nothing but the power, and I will use that power to crush the human fleets before they can even launch their fighters." He gestured, and a holographic projection filled the room. It showed a vision of the future, human colonies burning, Aelari warships firing indiscriminately, a galaxy drowning in blood. "See what you will build," Malcor whispered. Lyria sobbed, pressing her forehead to the floor. The vision was overwhelming. The despair was absolute. She felt the weight of billions of deaths. Cassian groaned, pushing himself up. His ribs were broken. He could feel the grinding bone. He spat blood onto the pristine floor. He looked at Lyria. She was fading. Her light was dimming, being swallowed by the Regent's shadow. He had no weapon. He had no plan. He just had the truth. "Lyria!" he croaked. She didn't move. Cassian forced himself to his feet. He staggered toward her. The psychic pressure coming off Malcor was like walking into a jet engine. It pushed against his mind, a wall of pure hate. "Die, insect. Lie down and die." "No," Cassian gritted out. He took a step. Malcor turned to him, amused. "You persist? You are a biological error. You have no power here. I have a choice." Cassian snarled. He took another step. He was 10 feet away from Lyria. "Lyria, listen to me, not to him. Look at the people." Malcor laughed. "What people?" "The ones she touched," Cassian shouted. Lyria's head lifted slightly. Remember the mechanic in the lower levels, Cassian yelled, fighting the invisible weight that tried to crush his lungs. Remember the children in the market. Remember the human marines teaching the guards how to play poker. They don't want war. Lyria, they want to live. Malcor frowned. Silence him. He flicked his hand. Cassian was lifted into the air and slammed down again. Cassian screamed, but he dragged himself forward on his elbows. He reached out his hand. Lyria! I choose you. Lyria looked at his hand. It was bloody. It was shaking. But it was there. Something inside her snapped. Not the break Malcor wanted, but a break in the chains he had forged. She remembered. She remembered the warmth of Cassian's chest. She remembered the laughter in the safe house. She remembered the feeling of being safe. She reached out. Her fingers brushed Cassian's. The contact was the spark. Malcor realized his mistake too late. He had tried to crush an empath with fear, but he had forgotten that empathy worked both ways. Lyria didn't block Malcor. She opened the door. She grabbed Cassian's mind, not gently this time, but fiercely. She pulled him in. She pulled in his pain, his stubbornness, his love, his soldier's grit. And she mixed it with her own power. She created a resonance, a feedback loop of human resilience and Alari psychic energy. It was a frequency that the ancient crown was never designed to process. It was the sound of two species singing the same note. The air in the throne hall turned white. The crown on Malcor's head began to scream. The crystals cracked. Stop! Malcor shrieked, clutching his head. It burns! Lyria stood up. She was glowing, not with the pale light of the Alari, but with a fierce, burning silver fire. She pulled Cassian up with her. We are not your puppets, Lyria shouted. Her voice was two voices, hers and Cassian's layered together. She unleashed the pulse. It wasn't a weapon of war. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered emotion, shame, longing, hope, desire, the raw, messy, beautiful chaos of being alive. It hit Malcor. The crown shattered. The explosion of psychic energy threw Malcor backward. He flew across the room and slammed into the emerald throne, the fragments of the crown raining down around him like broken stars. The purity signal died instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Cassian swayed, and Lyria caught him. The silver fire faded from her skin, leaving her looking exhausted but triumphant. Across the room, Malcor groaned. He tried to stand, but he collapsed. The link was broken. His mind was his own again, small, petty, and defeated. Guards burst into the room. Terran, the palace commander, looked from the shattered crown to the fallen regent. He lowered his weapon. Secure the traitor. Terran ordered his men. 2 guards hauled Malcor to his feet. He looked at Lyria with hatred, but also with fear. Kill me, Malcor hissed. Finish it. It is the way of the victor. One of the guards raised his pike. No, Lyria said softly. She stepped forward, leaning heavily on Cassian. If I kill you, I become you, she said. I rule by fear. She looked at the commander. Place him in a suppression cell. He will stand trial. The entire empire will see his crimes, and they will see that justice is stronger than vengeance. Terran bowed low. As you command, Your Highness. They dragged the regent away. Lyria looked at Cassian. Her eyes were swimming with fatigue. We did it, she whispered. Cassian smiled through his bloody teeth. Sturdy, he rasped. Just like you said. 3 days later, the broadcast went out to every screen in the Alari Empire and every datapad in the Human Systems Alliance. Lyria stood on the podium of the assembly hall. She was not wearing the heavy ceremonial robes of her station. She wore a simple tunic of white and gold. Her markings were calm. She looked into the camera. I am not perfect, she began. Her voice was steady. For years, I hid my heart because I was told that feeling was a weakness. I was told that to rule, I had to be stone. She paused. But stone cracks. Stone crumbles. Life bends. Life adapts. She looked off camera, and for a brief second the camera caught the edge of a human uniform. I fell in love with a human, she said openly, and it did not destroy me. It saved me. It taught me that the walls we build between our species, the walls of class, of biology, of tradition, are illusions. We are all afraid. We all wish to be safe. We all wish to choose our own future. She leaned forward. The peace we sign today is not just paper. It is a promise that we will stop trying to control each other and start trying to understand each other. It will be messy. It will be hard. But it will be real. She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who finally owned her own soul. And I would rather have a messy peace than a perfect war. The evening air on the high balcony was cool. The view of Typhon was spectacular, the gas giant churning in bands of violet and orange. Cassian leaned against the railing. His ribs were taped, and his arm was in a sling. But he was standing. He heard the soft footsteps behind him. He didn't turn. "You gave a good speech," he said. Lyria moved to stand beside him. The wind caught her hair. "I had a good writer," she teased gently. Cassian looked at her. The crisis was over. The treaty was signed. Malcor was in prison. The universe was taking a breath. But there was still one question left. He turned to face her. He struggled for a moment, then slowly, stiffly, he lowered himself to one knee. Lyria frowned. "Cassian, you are injured. Stand up." "No," he said. "I need to ask this." He looked up at her. He wasn't looking at a princess. He was looking at the woman who had pulled him out of the dark. "The mission is over. Lyria, the threat is gone. You don't need a bodyguard anymore. You don't need a shield." He took a breath. "So I am asking, not as a liaison, not as a soldier. Do you still want me here? After all this? Or should I go back to being just a memory?" Lyria stared at him. Her markings flared a soft, warm pink. She reached down and took his uninjured hand. She didn't pull him up immediately. She squeezed his fingers. "You are not a memory. Cassian," she whispered. "You are my heart." She pulled him to his feet. She wrapped her arms around him, careful of his ribs, and buried her face in his chest. "I do not want a shield," she said against his uniform. "I want a partner. I want you to wake up next to me every morning and complain about the coffee. I want you to be the one place where I do not have to be a princess. I want to be Lyria. And Lyria chooses you." Cassian closed his eyes, resting his chin on her head. He felt the tension of 20 years finally leave his body. "Then I guess I am staying," he said. "Forever?" she asked, looking up. Cassian kissed her forehead. "As long as the stars are burning, princess. Or until the gravity gives out again, whichever comes first." Lyria laughed. It was a free, happy sound that drifted out over the balcony, lost in the vast, beautiful silence of the stars. They stood there together, human and alien, holding on to each other as the galaxy turned beneath them, ready to face whatever came next. Together. 3 weeks after the Battle of the Throne Hall, the Alari Orbital Palace did not look like a fortress of secrets anymore. It looked like a construction site. The damage from the psychic shockwave and the subsequent firefights was being repaired. But the repairs were different this time. The opaque high walls that had separated the royal sectors from the common areas were being replaced with transparent crystalline lattices. It was a literal and metaphorical architectural choice Lyria had insisted upon. If the government was to be trusted, it had to be seen. Cassian Ward stood in the observation gallery of the High Court, watching the proceedings below. Regent Malcor stood in a containment field in the center of the room. He was stripped of his finery, wearing simple gray prisoner garb. There were no shadows to hide in. The trial was being broadcast to every screen on the station and to the fleet anchored off the shoulder of Typhon. The transparency was terrifying to the old guard, but to the citizens, it was oxygen. Cassian tugged at the collar of his dress uniform. He felt stiff. His ribs had knit together thanks to Alari medical gel, but the ache of the battle still lingered in his joints when the humidity rose. Beside him, Corporal Kowalski leaned against the railing, watching the trial with a grim satisfaction. "They are actually going to convict him," Kowalski said, sounding surprised. "I thought for sure they would pull some diplomatic immunity nonsense." "Lyria does not believe in immunity," Cassian said quietly. "She believes in consequences." The doors to the gallery hissed open, and a harried-looking Alari protocol droid hovered in. "Liaison Ward," the droid chirped. "Your presence is requested in the Cultural Integration Committee. There has been an incident." Cassian sighed. "Another assassination attempt?" "No, sir," the droid said. "A linguistic emergency. The Cultural Integration Committee met in what used to be a ballroom. It was now a chaotic open-plan office where human administrators and Ilari functionaries tried to merge two civilizations that had spent the last 50 years shooting at each other. The incident, as it turned out, involved a human idiom. Cassian arrived to find a young human aide, Lieutenant Evans, surrounded by 4 terrified Ilari linguists. The Ilari were scanning the ceiling with handheld sensors, their markings flashing a frantic warning yellow. "Liaison Ward," one of the linguists cried, rushing over. "You must evacuate the sector. Lieutenant Evans has predicted a biological catastrophe." Cassian looked at Evans. "What did you say to them?" "Lieutenant?" Evans looked mortified. "Sir, I just said that the negotiations were going well, but we should not count our chickens before they hatched." The linguist trembled. "We have scanned the station manifest. There are no chickens on board. If they are hatching spontaneously, it implies a rapid, unauthorized biological infestation." Cassian rubbed his temples. He felt a headache forming behind his eyes. "It is a metaphor," Cassian explained patiently. "It means we should not celebrate a victory before it is finalized. There are no actual birds. No biology is hatching." The Ilari lowered their sensors. Their markings shifted to a confused gray. "Human speech is incredibly inefficient," the linguist noted, looking offended. "Why reference poultry when discussing treaties?" "Because we are a confusing species," Cassian said. "Just assume everything is a metaphor until something actually explodes." He walked away, leaving them to their confusion. This was the new war. It was not fought with plasma rifles, but with paperwork, awkward pauses, and the desperate attempt to bridge a gap of 1,000,000 years of evolutionary difference. It was exhausting. It was messy. And it was exactly what Lyria wanted. Later that afternoon, Cassian found himself in a place that made him even more uncomfortable than the committee room. He was in the royal tailory. Lyria had insisted he attend the fitting. The emperor, having emerged from his healing coma and resumed his throne, had summoned Cassian for a private audience. Protocol demanded formal attire. The Ilari tailor, a tall, spindly being with 6 fingers on each hand, was measuring Cassian's inseam with a beam of light. "The shoulder width is aggressive," the tailor murmured, sounding disappointed. And the posture is too rigid. We must drape the fabric to soften the silhouette. The consort must look approachable, decorative. Cassian stiffened. Consort. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Since the battle, the court had been trying to shove him into a box. To the Alari nobility, he was the princess's pet, the consort, a symbolic role meant to look pretty, stand 2 steps behind her, and not speak unless spoken to. To the humans, he was something else. His comms unit buzzed. It was General Holloway calling from Earth Command. Cassian tapped the earpiece. Ward here. Cassian. Holloway's voice was crisp. I have the paperwork in front of me. The Senate is impressed. You stopped a coup, saved the treaty, and secured a tech-sharing agreement. They want to give you a promotion, Vice Admiral. Cassian looked at himself in the holographic mirror. He saw a man in a half-finished Alari robe that looked like a dress. Vice Admiral Ward, it comes with a command. Holloway continued. The Third Fleet. You would be stationed out of Mars Dock. You would be the face of the new alliance, Cassian. A hero. But you would need to come home. Cassian stared at his reflection. Home. For 20 years. Home had been a bunk on a dropship. Before that, it was a memory of a house that burned down in the first skirmishes. Now, home was a feeling. It was the quiet hum of a mind touching his. I need time to think. General, Cassian said. Don't take too long. Son, Holloway warned. The window of opportunity closes fast, and you don't want to be stuck there as a glorified purse holder for the rest of your life. Cassian cut the connection. The tailor stepped back. There. We shall add layers of silk to hide the scars. By the time we are finished, you will look like a proper fixture of the court. Cassian ripped the half-finished robe off his shoulders. He threw it on the floor. No silk, Cassian said, his voice hard. And I am not hiding the scars. He walked out, leaving the tailor sputtering. He found Lyria in the gardens. She was not alone. She was surrounded by a gaggle of young noblewomen who were looking at her with wide, worshipful eyes. Since the revelation of her power and her speech, Lyria had become an icon. She wasn't the shy, fragile girl anymore. She was the radiant symbol of the new age. She saw him approach. Her eyes lit up, the gold flecks swirling. She excused herself from the group and walked over to him. She didn't care who was watching. She reached out and took his hand. You look like you want to punch something, she said softly. Her voice echoed in his mind, a cool, soothing balm. Or someone. Just a tailor. Cassian grunted. And maybe a general. Lyria led him away from the crowds, down a path lined with singing ferns. They are trying to define you, aren't they? She asked. They are offering me a choice, Cassian said. On one hand, I can be Vice Admiral Ward, hero of the fleet, safe on a carrier 3 light years away. On the other hand, I can be the consort, the human decoration who stands behind the throne and smiles. He stopped and looked at her. I am a soldier. Lyria, I need a mission. I need to be useful. I don't know how to be a symbol. Lyria stopped. She turned to him, her expression fierce. Then do not be a symbol, she said. She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. I did not fall in love with a vice admiral. And I certainly did not fall in love with a consort. I fell in love with Cassian, the man who jumps in front of falling glass, the man who opens ration packs for me. She looked deep into his eyes. Define your own role. If the job does not exist, build it. But do not let them tell you who you are. You taught me that. Cassian looked at her. He felt the truth of her words vibrating in his bone. She was right. He had spent his whole life following orders. First the militaries, now the courts. It was time to give his own orders. That evening, the state dinner was an exercise in endurance. The great hall was packed. Humans and Alari sat at long tables, awkwardly trying to eat each other's food. The air was filled with the polite murmur of people who were terrified of causing an interstellar incident. Cassian sat next to Lyria at the head table. He was wearing his dress uniform, not the silk robes. He saw the Emperor watching him from the high seat, a frail but imposing figure with eyes like ancient stars. A holographic screen above the hall was playing the evening entertainment. It was a popular new drama series produced by a human studio titled The Princess and the Marine. Cassian watched in horror as a devastatingly handsome actor with muscles on his muscles ripped his shirt off and shouted, "I will save you, Star Child!" On screen, the actress playing Lyria swooned, clutching a pearl necklace. "Oh, save me, my brute! My alien heart cannot handle the passion." Laughter rippled through the hall. Cassian buried his face in his hands. "I am going to kill the producer," he muttered. Lyria was trying to suppress a giggle. Her shoulders were shaking. "It is dramatic. It is slander." Cassian groaned. "I have never called you Star Child, and I definitely do not possess pectorals of that magnitude. And I do not swoon," Lyria whispered, leaning close to his ear. "I detonate things." Cassian looked at her. The mischief in her eyes was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Get me out of here," he whispered back, "before I start throwing bread rolls at the screen." Lyria nodded. She tapped her glass for a toast, distracted the table with a quick telekinetic flare of the centerpiece, and in the confusion, they slipped out the side door. They ran down the corridor like teenagers skipping school, hand in hand, leaving the pomp and the satire behind them. They ended up in the private royal garden, inside a biodome at the very top of the spire. Here, it was quiet. The only light came from the bioluminescent vines that draped over the trellises, pulsing with a soft heartbeat rhythm. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. They sat on a bench overlooking the galaxy. Cassian loosened his tie. He took a deep breath, letting the silence settle. Lyria leaned against him. Her aura was calm, a warm blanket around his mind. But beneath the calm, there was a question. It had been there for weeks. Unspoken. "Cassian," she said softly. He knew what was coming. "You are thinking about time," he said. Lyria nodded against his shoulder. "The Alari live for 300 years, she said. "Sometimes longer. Your species burns faster." Cassian looked at his hands. They were already showing the signs of age, the fine lines, the scars, the ache in the knuckles. "I am 38, he said, "in human terms. I am halfway through. In your terms. I am barely an infant." He turned to look at her. She looked ageless, her skin was flawless, her eyes ancient. "If I stay, Lyria, I will grow old, I will slow down, I will be a blink of an eye in your life." Lyria sat up. She took his face in her hands. "Then I will not blink," she whispered fiercely. She traced the lines around his eyes. "I do not care about the math, Cassian. I do not care if we have 5 years or 50. I would rather have a single day with you, a day where I am truly seen, than a century of loneliness with someone who lives forever but never touches my soul." She leaned in, resting her brow against his. "You are not a blink. You are the event. You are the impact that changed my orbit. That does not fade." Cassian felt a lump in his throat. He realized he had been holding on to this fear, the fear of being a temporary inconvenience to her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. He kissed her. It wasn't the frantic kiss of the midnight confession, and it wasn't the desperate kiss of the battlefield. It was a slow, deliberate claiming. It was a kiss that promised he wasn't going anywhere. The bioluminescent vines above them flared brighter in response to their emotion, bathing them in a cascade of soft blue light. "You know," Cassian murmured, pulling back slightly, "I still have nightmares. About the war. About the things I did. I know," she said. "I feel them when you sleep. Loving you didn't fix me," he admitted. "I'm not whole. I'm still cracked." Lyria smiled, a sad, sweet expression. "And I am still afraid," she said. "Every time I open myself up, I am terrified I will lose control. Love is not a cure, Cassian. It is not magic." "Then what is it?" "It is the light," she said. "It is the light that lets us see the cracks so we can mend them. It is the courage to ask for help." Cassian nodded. He kissed her hand, his lips lingering on her knuckles. "We are going to be a disaster," he joked softly. "An aging human soldier and a psychic alien princess. The tabloids will have a field day." "Let them," Lyria said. "We will give them a show worth watching." The next morning, the Treaty of Typhon was signed. The ceremony was broadcast across 2 sectors. The Emperor sat on the Emerald Throne, looking frail but commanding. Regent Malcor was nowhere to be seen. His cell was deep in the station's core. Cassian stood in the front row, not as a vice admiral, and not as a consort. He wore a new uniform. It was a hybrid design, human utility mixed with Ilari elegance. On his collar was a new insignia, a silver shield crossed with an olive branch. When it was his turn to approach the throne, the Emperor looked down at him. "Liaison Ward," the Emperor said. His voice was like grinding stones. "You have declined the promotion from your own military. You have declined the ceremonial robes of my court. What exactly do you wish to be?" Cassian stood at attention. He looked at Lyria, who was standing at the Emperor's right hand. She smiled. "I wish to be the bridge, Your Majesty," Cassian said clearly. "The bridge? Peace is not signed on paper, sir," Cassian continued. "It is built in the mess hall. It is built in the corridors. Someone needs to explain to your people why humans tell jokes when they are scared. And someone needs to explain to my people why Ilari don't shake hands." He looked around the room. "I am the liaison. Permanent assignment. I answer to the princess, and I answer to the Alliance. My job is to make sure we don't start shooting again just because of a bad translation." The Emperor considered this. A slow smile spread across his ancient face. "A translator of intent," the Emperor mused. "Very well. Liaison Ward, you have your post." Lyria stepped forward. She didn't bow to him. She nodded, an equal to an equal. "Welcome aboard, Liaison," she said professionally, though her eyes were dancing. "Thank you, Your Highness," Cassian replied. Time moved on. The weeks turned into months. The station settled into a new rhythm. It was a noisier station now. Humans and Ilari mixed in the markets. There were arguments. There were bar fights. There were cultural misunderstandings that resulted in minor explosions. But there was no war. One night, 6 months after the treaty, Cassian was in his quarters. He was reviewing a report on a joint mining operation that had stalled because the human foreman had offended the Ilari geology singer by humming out of tune. Cassian rubbed his eyes, chuckling to himself. He would have to go down there and smooth it over. The time on his display read 0000 hours. Midnight. A soft chime sounded at his door. Cassian paused. He looked at the door. He didn't check the security feed. He didn't reach for his weapon. "Come in," he called out. The door hissed open. Lyria stood there. She was not wearing her royal robes. She was wearing a pair of oversized human sweatpants and a t-shirt that she had stolen from his drawer weeks ago. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. Her feet were bare. She didn't look like a princess. She didn't look like a weapon. She looked like Lyria. She leaned against the doorframe, a playful glint in her eyes. "You are awake," she noted. "Again." "Insomnia is a hard habit to break," Cassian said, leaning back in his chair. "And you? Wandering the halls at the witching hour?" "I couldn't sleep," she said. "The palace is too quiet." She walked into the room. The door sealed behind her with a soft click. She moved to his desk and sat on the edge of it, pushing his datapad aside. She looked down at him. Her markings were glowing a soft, contented gold. "I remember a night like this," she said softly, "a long time ago. I stood outside that door, shaken so hard I thought my bones would rattle apart. I told you I couldn't control it anymore." Cassian smiled, reaching out to rest his hands on her waist. "I remember. You looked like you were about to face a firing squad. I felt like it," she admitted. "I felt like I was jumping off a cliff." She leaned forward, bracing her hands on the arms of his chair, trapping him. "And now?" Cassian asked. "Now?" She tilted her head. "I still can't control it. Cassian. Life. Politics. The fact that you leave your socks on the floor and I can't control any of it." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "But I realized something. Control is boring. Chaos is much more interesting, and especially when you have a co-pilot." She kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It wasn't fearful. It was confident, warm, and deeply, familiarly loving. It tasted of peppermint tea and trust. Cassian hummed against her lips, pulling her closer. The lights in the room dimmed automatically, sensing the mood, casting the room in a warm, amber glow. "I choose you," Lyria whispered against his mouth. "Every day, every midnight. I choose you, and I choose you," Cassian replied, "even when you steal my t-shirts, and especially then." Outside the viewport, the galaxy continued to spin. Below the station, the great gas giant Typhon swirled in its eternal storm. But above it, in the black velvet of space, a fleet was gathering. It was a mixed fleet. Blocky, utilitarian human cruisers drifted alongside the elegant crystalline ships of the Aelari. They were not in attack formation. They were in a parade formation, moving together in a clumsy, beautiful dance. Small shuttles zipped between them, carrying engineers, artists, and lovers from one world to the other. It was not a perfect universe. There were still shadows in the dark. There were still old hatreds and new fears. The silence of space was vast and cold, but as the lights of the two fleets mingled, creating a new constellation in the dark, it was clear that the silence was no longer empty. In a galaxy full of dangerous power and ancient conspiracies, the bravest act was not to fire a weapon or build a wall. The bravest act was to open a door at midnight, look into the eyes of the stranger on the other side, and say, "I choose you." And in the warm, golden light of cabin 404, Cassian and Lyria chose each other again and again.